They say the memory of the Earth is longer than ours, that beneath the quiet layers of stone and salt, 1,000 forgotten worlds still breathe, waiting for someone to remember. Atlantis was only one name we gave to that memory, a symbol for every city swallowed by time, every civilization erased not by war, but by the turning of the planet itself. What if the story of Atlantis is not singular, but cyclical? What if, before us, there were many, each rising with brilliance and falling into silence? The continents have shifted, the seas have devoured empires, and the dust of mountains once built by hands we no longer know lies beneath our feet. Scientists call it geological amnesia, the natural erasure of time so vast that human history becomes only a whisper in the sediment. But what if, within those erased epochs, traces of something older, something intelligent, remain? Tonight, we follow those whispers, across deserts and ocean floors, through myths, fossils, and magnetic fields. We will search not for Atlantis alone, but for the pattern of civilizations that came before it. Because perhaps the story of humanity is not a straight line, but a pulse that repeats. Welcome to Secrets Earth. If you enjoy this journey through the forgotten past, like, subscribe, and share where and when you're listening. The night has many stories left to tell. The ocean is a keeper of secrets. It hides them not out of malice, but out of patience. Beneath the cold silence of its depths, mountains rise and collapse. Rivers of molten rock reshape the seafloor, and entire continents drift as if in a slow, dreamlike waltz. To the ocean, time does not move forward. It folds. The world that existed 10,000 years ago may be gone to us, but to the seabed, it is still there, layered in memory, compressed into the folds of stone and silt. Scientists have long known that Earth has a short memory for its surface. Over millions of years, tectonic plates recycle the crust like a restless tide, swallowing old seabeds and raising new lands. This process, called subduction, is why we rarely find traces of anything older than 200 million years on the ocean floor. The rest, whatever lived, whatever built, whatever dreamed, has been pulled into the molten heart of the planet. If Atlantis ever existed, its bones would have long since melted back into magma, and yet fragments remain, not in marble ruins or sunken temples, but in anomalies, in impossible stones, in magnetic scars on the seabed that do not match the known cycles of reversal. The idea of multiple lost civilizations has long hovered at the edge of science, whispered by explorers, dismissed by scholars, yet never entirely silenced. Plato's Atlantis was only the most famous of these ghosts. Before him, the Egyptians spoke of the Zep Tepi, the first time, an age when gods walked among men, and the Nile Valley was not yet sand but forest and floodplain. In India's Vedic hymns, the Mahabharata tells of wars fought with weapons that made the heavens burn, in ages long before history began. The Sumerians wrote of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years before the flood, and in the ice caves of Greenland layers of trapped atmosphere whisper of climates that have shifted violently, like a heartbeat through the ages. For centuries these were treated as myths, poetry without anchor. But then came the discoveries, fragments of the unimaginable that refused to fit the official timeline. In 1994, divers off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, found what appeared to be a submerged pyramid, terraces, steps and flat walls carved into the seabed. Geologists debated, was it the work of nature, or a civilization erased by rising seas at the end of the last ice age? Off the coast of Cuba, sonar scans revealed symmetrical structures 2,000 feet below the surface, too deep for any known settlement. And in the Gulf of Kambat in India, beneath 120 feet of murky water, sonar imaging revealed an ancient river system and possible stone foundations, dated to around 9,000 years ago, millennia before the birth of the first known city in Mesopotamia. Each find is controversial. Each carries the weight of both wonder and skepticism, for science demands evidence and time erases it mercilessly. Erosion, tectonic shifts, sedimentation. The Earth hides her secrets well. But every so often something surfaces, a shard of obsidian where no volcano exists, a tool cut from rock older than humanity itself, a coastline that bears the signature of sudden, catastrophic flooding. When the last ice age ended roughly 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose by more than 400 feet. The melting of vast glacial sheets, some the size of continents, drowned the coastal plains that once connected many of today's islands and continents. What we now call the Mediterranean was once a fertile valley. The Black Sea was once a freshwater lake. The Sunda Shelf, stretching between modern-day Indonesia and Southeast Asia, was a vast subcontinent, a cradle for cultures we no longer remember. In less than a few centuries, all of it vanished beneath the rising waters. To those who lived through it, it must have felt like the end of the world, and perhaps it was, for them. Archaeologists call this period the Younger Dryas, a climatic shift so abrupt, so violent, that it erased entire ecosystems and forced humanity into a new epoch. It was a planetary reset, triggered perhaps by a sudden disruption in ocean circulation or by an impact from a comet that shattered across the ice sheets of North America, sending fire into the sky and floods across the Earth. The debate remains unresolved, but one thing is clear: the planet changed almost overnight. Civilization, as we understand it, had to begin again from the ruins of something older. If humans existed before this cataclysm, or if there were other intelligent beings who shaped the world before us, their traces would lie beneath hundreds of meters of sediment sealed under the weight of water and time. Modern technology allows us to scan only a fraction of the seafloor. More than 80% of the ocean remains unmapped. Every ridge, every shadow could hide a story older than our species. And perhaps that is what the myth of Atlantis truly is. Not a place, but a pattern. A warning woven into the memory of cultures separated by oceans, that every rise carries its fall, that every light eventually drowns in its own reflection. The question is not whether Atlantis existed. The question is how many Atlantean ages there have been, how many dawns of intelligence, of architecture, of wonder, erased, then reborn, in the same slow breath of the earth, in the quiet dark of the deep ocean, where pressure crushes sound and light. Strange whispers echo in sonar scans, rhythmic, structured, almost deliberate. Are they geology, or something more? The story drifts downward now, into those uncharted depths, where ancient ridges and buried ruins sleep beneath miles of water, waiting for the next tremor to stir them awake. The ocean floor is not silent. It hums, a constant low vibration that scientists call seismic noise, a kind of background heartbeat of the planet. Within that hum are faint irregularities, echoes that pulse with uncanny precision. When deep-sea instruments first began to record these signals in the late 20th century, researchers assumed they came from whales, shifting ice, or underwater volcanic vents. But some patterns didn't match any known source. The signals repeated with geometric intervals, symmetrical, harmonic, as if written into the crust itself. They became known informally as the Songs of Stone, a poetic name for something that defied easy explanation. Geophysicists eventually traced some to tectonic stress, rock plates grinding against each other in rhythmic friction. Yet a few remained unexplained, as if the planet itself were playing back fragments of a memory encoded long before humans learned to listen. For those who dream of lost civilizations, this hum felt like a calling. Perhaps they suggested these vibrations were remnants of something ancient, the geological echo of machines, cities, or technologies erased by time. Of course, the scientific community dismissed such claims. Yet even in their rejection lay an acknowledgement. The deep earth holds more unknowns than certainties. When explorers mapped the mid-Atlantic ridge, a massive serpentine scar stretching across the ocean floor, they noticed that it ran almost precisely through the coordinates where Plato once placed Atlantis. Coincidence, said the skeptics. But to others it was irresistible. A buried spine of the earth, dividing what once might have been a single landmass, torn apart by fire and water. To understand this possibility, we must look not at myths, but at geology. The continents we know today are fragments of a much older world, pieces of ancient supercontinents like Pangaea, Gondwana, and Rodinia. Every few 100 million years, the Earth assembles its lands into a single colossal mass, only to break them apart again. This cycle, known as the Wilson cycle, shapes not only geography but life itself. Each union and separation triggers extinctions and rebirths, floods and deserts, evolution and oblivion. It is, in essence, the planet's breathing. If intelligent life arose before our current epoch, during one of those earlier cycles, it would have lived on lands now pulverized, melted, or buried beneath oceanic crust. Fossils older than the Cambrian explosion, about 540 million years ago, are nearly impossible to find, because the rocks that once held them have been recycled into new continents. What if consciousness itself has arisen more than once on this planet, not as a miracle, but as a recurrence, like the tides? To most scientists, such speculation borders on heresy. But then, so did the idea of continental drift when Alfred Wegener first proposed it in 1912. He was mocked, ridiculed, accused of fantasy. It took half a century, and the evidence of magnetic reversals frozen in seafloor basalt, for his theory to be vindicated. The Earth moves. The impossible becomes possible, given enough time. Archaeologists have already begun to find artifacts that defy classification. Objects embedded in strata far older than any known civilization. A metallic sphere from South Africa, perfectly balanced, with grooves etched around its equator, found in rock dated to nearly 3 billion years ago. Iron tools sealed within coal seams from the Carboniferous period, 300 million years before humans appeared. Tiny glass-like spheres fused into stone, discovered in the Himalayas, showing isotopic ratios not found in any known terrestrial alloy. Most are dismissed as geological oddities, misinterpretations, or hoaxes. But even if one is genuine, even one, it would rewrite everything. The temptation to believe in forgotten ages is not merely romantic, it is almost biological. Humans feel the pull of lost memory because deep down, our species carries the trauma of extinction, of knowing that civilizations end. The ruins of Sumer, the silent pyramids of Egypt, the collapsed temples of the Maya, all whisper the same truth. Permanence is an illusion. The Earth is the only historian that never lies, but she writes in the language of stone, and her handwriting erases itself with every age. Imagine, for a moment, a civilization that flourished before the Younger Dryas, perhaps 50,000 years ago or even more. Its people would have lived along coastlines that are now drowned, trading across shallow seas that no longer exist. They would have studied the stars, as every culture eventually does, and perhaps noticed patterns that our modern astronomy has only recently rediscovered. The precession of the equinoxes, the cycles of solar activity, the slow dance of Earth's magnetic field. Then came the ice, then the melt, the floods, the long forgetting. We find traces of this intelligence not in monuments, but in myth. From every corner of the world, legends converge. A great flood, a lost golden age, teachers who came from the sea to rebuild humanity. The Sumerians called him Oannes, the fish-clad sage who rose from the Persian Gulf to teach writing and law. The Mesoamericans spoke of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who brought knowledge and then departed over the ocean, promising to return. In the highlands of Peru, the god Viracocha was said to have emerged from the waters of Lake Titicaca to create civilization. Different continents, same story, same silence between the words. Could these tales be cultural memory, distorted but persistent, of those who survived the last collapse? Modern neuroscience tells us that memory is reconstructive. The brain rebuilds each recollection from fragments. Perhaps humanity does the same on a planetary scale. Each myth is a neuron. Together they form the faint outline of an ancient truth. In the caves of Sulawesi, in Indonesia, archaeologists have found hand stencils painted in red ochre dating back over 45,000 years, older than any known written symbol. The hands are arranged in a spiral, as if reaching towards something unseen. The pigment used contains traces of hematite, a mineral that aligns magnetically with the Earth's field. When exposed to certain frequencies, these pigments resonate faintly, as if the stones themselves were humming back the song of the planet. Coincidence, perhaps. But then again, the universe rarely wastes symmetry. If Atlantis was only one verse in this long-repeating song, one civilization among many that rose, fell, and was rewritten, then the question changes. We're no longer searching for a single lost city. We're searching for the rhythm of history itself, the pattern by which worlds bloom and vanish, And somewhere, deep beneath the Atlantic waves, where ancient faults glow faintly with geothermal light, a strange plateau rises from the abyss, as if a fragment of some older dream still refuses to die. The expedition that found it called it the Anomaly, but to those who still listen to the hum of the Earth, it sounds almost like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, waiting to be remembered. It began as a shadow on sonar, a faint elevation along the mid-Atlantic ridge where none should exist. The oceanographic vessel Calypso Meridian was conducting a routine survey for tectonic activity when the instruments picked up a shape rising from the abyss. It was broad, nearly symmetrical, and unlike the chaotic folds typical of volcanic formations. A second scan confirmed it, a plateau the size of a small city, sitting 12,000 feet below the surface. The researchers called it Site Theta. At first, no one thought much of it. The ocean is full of strange shapes. Basalt flows frozen in place, landslides sculpted by currents. But the more they scanned, the stranger it became. The plateau had right angles, not perfect ones, but precise enough to defy random geology. Long ridges intersected at near 90-degree turns, and along one edge sonar reflected off a row of what looked like uniform pillars. Natural basalt can form columns, yes, like those at the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, but not arranged in deliberate sequences, and never at such depth. The data was quietly sent to geophysicists at Woods Hole and the University of Lisbon. Most dismissed it as an imaging artifact, but one researcher, Dr. Amara Soren, couldn't let it go. She'd spent her career studying submerged topography and understood the language of the seafloor like a musician reading notation. The angles were too regular, the echo patterns too dense. If this is geology, she wrote in her notes, then the Earth has learned geometry. Months later, a remotely operated vehicle descended to the coordinates of Site Theta. The live feed that streamed back to the surface was grainy. The deep ocean eats light like hunger itself. Yet within the haze something emerged. A wall rising from the mud, its surface polished smooth as glass. It wasn't metal, not rock as we know it, but a composite of fused minerals, quartz, feldspar, and something that refracted light in an unnatural way, as if the structure absorbed colour instead of reflecting it. When the ROV's manipulator arm brushed against it, static pulsed through the feed. The sensors registered a faint electromagnetic field. The team thought it was interference from the cable, until the ROV backed away and the readings followed like a whisper. Of course, the footage was classified. Anything discovered below 2 miles in international waters falls under complex jurisdiction, often tied to military or resource exploration. Officially, Site Theta doesn't exist, but leaks have their own gravity. Data fragments, audio logs, even still images began to circulate through academic networks. What they showed was inconclusive, a blur of lines and shadows, yet enough to ignite the old question. What if this was a remnant, not a ruin of human origin, but of something before humanity? Dr. Soren proposed a radical hypothesis. The plateau, she argued, might be the last exposed portion of an ancient continental fragment, a microplate detached during the breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea roughly 180 million years ago. If so, it would have remained relatively stable beneath the Atlantic, escaping subduction. But her analysis went further. The crystalline material found along the ridge bore isotopic ratios not consistent with any known metamorphic rock. It was as though it had been heated and cooled in a controlled environment, engineered, not formed. To most geologists, this bordered on fiction, yet buried within her data, something refused to be ignored, an anomaly in the magnetic field. Across a 20-mile span of the ridge, the field reversed polarity in sharp rectangular zones, as if the very crust had been magnetized in deliberate patterns. Earth's magnetic reversals are typically chaotic and global, occurring over thousands of years. These were local, precise, and rhythmic, binary, almost digital. When physicists analyzed the data, they found something even stranger. The spacing of these zones corresponded to ratios of prime numbers. No known geological process produces such a pattern. One researcher joked, "If this is nature, then she's doing math." Another whispered, "Or remembering." We may never know who or what left that pattern behind, if it was left at all. The ocean is a vast machine for forgetting. Pressure crushes, salt erodes, life devours. Yet sometimes, in that endless decay, a fragment remains long enough to be seen, a flash of memory before the abyss closes again. It's tempting to dismiss all of this as coincidence, the human mind grasping for meaning in noise. But the deeper scientists look into the geological record, the more they find moments where the Earth itself seems to reset. Sudden discontinuities in sediment, isotopic anomalies, unexplainable layers of glass, carbon and ash that suggest industrial processes rather than natural events. In 2018, researchers from the University of Rochester discovered a mysterious layer of platinum across sites in North America, Europe and the Middle East, dating to roughly 12,800 years ago, the onset of the Younger Dryas. Platinum, rare in Earth's crust, is common in meteorites, but the layer was unusually uniform, as if distributed by atmospheric detonation. The event scorched the sky, melted ice, and plunged the planet into chaos. Civilization had to begin again from the cold. But what if that cataclysm did not simply end a prehistoric society? What if it also erased one? Evidence from Antarctica hints at something even older. Beneath 2 miles of ice, radar mapping has revealed geometric subglacial formations, parallel ridges and rectangular basins that mimic urban grid structures. Some scientists attribute them to volcanic fissures or ice flow distortions. Others quietly wonder whether, in an age when the poles were warm and green, something more deliberate might have existed there. The pattern repeats: anomaly, denial, rediscovery. It's the rhythm of lost memory. And yet, all across the planet, myths remember a single truth: that there was a time when the world ended, not once, but many times. From the Mayan Popol Vuh to the Babylonian Enuma Elish, creation begins not with birth, but with destruction. The gods erase, rebuild, erase again. Perhaps these stories are not theological at all, but historical. The echoes of civilizations rising and falling in cycles so vast we can barely trace them. Dr. Soren's team was disbanded after funding mysteriously vanished. The footage of Site Theta was sealed in a private archive. But one night, a fragment of audio surfaced online, a brief exchange from the expedition's final transmission. A technician's voice, strained through static, says softly, "It's humming again," then silence. If the Earth remembers through resonance, through the vibration of matter, then perhaps those hums are its way of speaking. Perhaps every mountain, every trench, every grain of sand carries a note from a world long gone, and perhaps, if we listen long enough, the song of Atlantis and all the forgotten civilizations before it might rise again from beneath the waves. Far below, in the blackness of Site Theta, the sensors still blink, faint pulses of blue, vanishing and reappearing in steady rhythm, like a heartbeat or a countdown. There are moments in science when a discovery refuses to stay silent, when data, no matter how inconvenient, begins to demand belief. For decades, the mainstream consensus has held that civilization, as we know it, began roughly 6,000 years ago in the fertile river valleys of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus. Before that, humanity was thought to live as scattered tribes of hunter-gatherers, guided by instinct and survival, not architecture or astronomy. But discoveries across the world have begun to whisper otherwise. High on a remote hill in southern Turkey stands a place that rewrote the timeline, Göbekli Tepe. It was unearthed not by grand design, but by accident, a shepherd noticing carved stones jutting from the soil. When excavations began in the 1990s, archaeologists were stunned. Beneath the hill lay a massive temple complex, megalithic pillars carved with animal reliefs, arranged in perfect circles. Radiocarbon dating placed it at 11,600 years old, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older even than agriculture itself. Humanity, it seemed, had built monuments before it built cities. To this day, no one fully understands how Göbekli Tepe came to be. The limestone pillars weigh up to 16 tons, yet no tools from that era should have been capable of carving or transporting them. The artwork is intricate: leopards, snakes, cranes, and vultures carved with anatomical precision. And then there is the strangest mystery of all. After centuries of use, the entire site was deliberately buried. Layer upon layer of sand and stone sealed it like a tomb. Whoever built it wanted it hidden, preserved for some future time, or perhaps protected from something that was coming. When geologists studied the sediment layer surrounding the site, they found evidence of abrupt climatic change, torrential flooding and a sudden drop in temperature characteristic of the Younger Dryas. The temple, it seemed, had been constructed at the exact boundary between two worlds, one dying, one being born. But Göbekli Tepe was not alone. Across continents, in places once dismissed as myth, ruins began to surface, all sharing impossible dates. The pyramids of Corral in Peru, the megaliths of Nabta Playa in the Egyptian desert, the underwater terraces of Yonaguni in Japan, all built at the twilight of the last ice age, as if scattered remnants of a global culture racing against extinction. Some researchers noticed a strange alignment. Many of these sites pointed toward the same stars, the belt of Orion, Sirius, and the Pleiades. These constellations appear again and again in myth, from Egypt's Osiris to Greece's Atlas, to the Hopi legends of the Seven Sisters. To ancient peoples, the heavens were not just decoration, they were memory, a celestial library. Perhaps, they believed, what was lost on Earth was recorded in the sky. Dr. Soren once wrote that archaeology suffers from a blindness of comfort, a reluctance to see beyond the limits of accepted history. We assume progress is linear, she said in a lecture later removed from public archives, but perhaps civilization is recursive, like a heartbeat, rising, collapsing, rising again. The ruins we dig from the ground may not be our ancestors' first cities, they may be their last refuges. There is a haunting possibility hidden in her words, that what we call the dawn of civilization may have been, in truth, a second dawn, a rebuilding from ashes. The flood myths of every culture speak not only of divine punishment, but of survival. In the Sumerian Eridu Genesis, a man named Ziusudra builds a vessel to preserve life from a deluge sent by the gods. In the Hebrew story of Noah, it becomes an ark. In Hindu scripture, it is Manu's boat. Even the Greeks tell of Deucalion and Pyrrha, who repopulated the world after Zeus drowned it. Every story ends the same way, with a handful of survivors watching the water recede, the sky clearing, the world reborn. Could these be more than allegories? The end of the Ice Age saw catastrophic floods, as glacial meltwater tore through continents. The Black Sea flood theory suggests that around 5600 BCE, rising Mediterranean waters breached the Bosporus and transformed a freshwater lake into a saltwater sea, a cataclysm witnessed by thousands. Perhaps those survivors carried fragments of an older knowledge, scattered across the world as they rebuilt. There is a curious detail carved on one of the pillars at Göbekli Tepe, a scorpion beside a downward-pointing vulture under a crescent moon. Astronomers studying the carving noticed that its celestial configuration corresponds precisely to a night sky, 10,150 BCE, the very onset of the Younger Dryas. It is, in essence, a timestamp in stone. Whoever carved it knew the heavens intimately, and understood that the sky itself could serve as a clock to outlast any civilization. But what if that knowledge was not born there? What if it was inherited? Every myth of gods descending to teach mankind could be the echo of those who survived an earlier fall. Maybe they weren't gods at all, but remnants of a prior age, carrying with them the science, the stories, and the warnings of a world already lost. In Peru, the pre-Inca Nazca lines stretch across 50 square kilometers of desert, visible only from above. For centuries, scholars assumed they were primitive ceremonial pathways. Yet new LIDAR scans reveal geometric perfection. Parallel lines stretching for miles, intersecting at angular ratios mirroring the solstices. They are not random. They are maps, perhaps of the stars, perhaps of something that once stood upon that plane and is now gone. Patterns emerge like constellations connecting themselves. Stone circles in Britain aligned with those in Turkey, pyramids in Egypt mirroring those in Central America. Cultures separated by oceans, yet dreaming the same architecture, the same symbols, the same sky. Coincidence? Or memory? Modern anthropology explains it as convergent evolution, similar ideas arising from similar conditions. But the symmetry is too precise, the parallels too many. What if human memory, too, evolves? What if certain truths are written not in language, but in the subconscious of our species, reawakening every few millennia when the Earth itself allows it? A civilization lost, reborn, forgotten, reborn again. A pulse that never truly ends. In the quiet of Göbekli Tepe, where the wind hums through ancient stone, the alignment of pillars still traces constellations that no longer shine where they once did. It is as if the builders tried to anchor themselves to the heavens before the earth shifted beneath them. A message for those who would one day remember, or rediscover, what was lost. And somewhere beneath the Atlantic, beneath the cold pressure of 12,000 feet of water, a hum still echoes from site theta, the same frequency recorded near Turkey, near Peru, near Japan. It is faint, rhythmic, almost human. A single note carried across time and stone, whispering, "We were here." The ocean holds its breath. The earth waits for its next remembering. And far above, the stars, the same ones that watched the last world drown, keep their silent vigil. The search for origins always begins in the wrong place. We look outward, to monuments and ruins, as if civilization were defined by what it leaves behind. But the truth, if there is one, lies much deeper, in the forgotten strata beneath our feet. The earth is a palimpsest, a manuscript rewritten again and again, where the faint ink of earlier chapters still bleeds through. Geologists call it the stratigraphic record, a slow, layered diary of the planet. In it, one can read the rise and fall of oceans, the pulse of volcanoes, even the fingerprints of extinction. And sometimes, in the quiet layers between catastrophes, there are traces of something that shouldn't be there at all. In 2015, a team of sedimentologists drilling off the coast of Mauritania, near the massive circular formation known as the Eye of the Sahara, made a discovery that puzzled even them. The core samples contained microscopic glass spheres, fused with metallic compounds unknown in any natural context. These tektites, as they're called, are usually formed by meteor impacts, brief moments when stone becomes liquid under unimaginable heat. But these were different, uniform in shape, mixed with traces of carbon and nickel, as though smelted rather than struck. Embedded in the same layer were small particles of fused quartz, aligned magnetically, as if they had cooled inside an electromagnetic field. When analysed under electron microscopy, the spheres revealed microstructures, lattice patterns reminiscent of nanocrystalline alloys. Yet the surrounding strata were dated to nearly 12,000 years ago, far predating any known metallurgy. The findings were published quietly, buried in a technical journal under the cautious title Anomalous Spherules in Late Pleistocene Sediments. The conclusion: origin uncertain. To those who have spent a lifetime tracing the edges of the lost world, origin uncertain is the most beautiful phrase in science. It means the door is still open. The Eye of the Sahara, the Risha structure, has long been one of the strangest scars on the planet. From orbit it looks almost deliberate. Concentric rings nearly 30 miles wide, eroded into perfect symmetry. For decades, scientists have debated its cause: a collapsed dome, a volcanic uplift, a meteorite impact. Yet its resemblance to Plato's description of Atlantis, a circular city of alternating rings of land and water, has drawn endless fascination. Satellite imaging reveals channels that might once have been waterways, now long dry, and mineral deposits indicating the presence of saltwater intrusion thousands of years ago. Of course, geological coincidence is not proof of lost civilizations. But the Risha structure lies precisely along the ancient shoreline of what was once a vast inland sea before the Sahara became desert. 10,000 years ago, this land was lush, dotted with lakes, forests and rivers. Cave art across the region depicts giraffes, elephants, even crocodiles. It was by all accounts a paradise. If Atlantis was not an island in the sea, but a land drowned by sand and time, perhaps this was it, not sunk beneath the ocean, but buried beneath a shifting desert ocean of its own. Archaeologists exploring nearby regions have found stone tools, pottery fragments, and engravings that date far earlier than they should. One site near Tichit in Mauritania shows evidence of urban planning, rectangular dwellings, defensive walls and granaries, dating back over 8,000 years. It was a city built before the accepted birth of cities. Who were these people? No one knows. Their language, their art, their name are gone. But their architecture whispers of memory, of a lineage that knew how to shape stone long before history began recording itself. Dr. Amara Soren once said that the Sahara is the ocean that forgot how to move. Its dunes shift like waves, its mirages shimmer like the reflection of distant islands. To her, the desert was not empty but full, a frozen sea preserving echoes of another epoch. "When you walk here," she wrote, "you're walking through the ruins of forgotten water." The more scientists studied these anomalies, the more uncomfortable patterns appeared. Around the world, the end of the Pleistocene, the same period marked by the Younger Dryas, left behind not just evidence of climate collapse but of sudden technological discontinuities. Cave art abruptly became more complex. Megalithic construction appeared out of nowhere. Agriculture emerged simultaneously in multiple unconnected regions. It was as if someone had pressed reset, but left fragments of the old program running. Geneticists mapping ancient human DNA have found something equally strange. A handful of haplogroups, genetic signatures, that seem to have no clear point of origin. They appear scattered across continents, from South America to the Pacific Islands, without a traceable migration route. Some scientists attribute this to random mutation or sampling error. Others quietly wonder if they are the genetic ghosts of a population lost to sea or sand. In myth, those survivors are called by many names, and the teachers, the builders, the serpents of wisdom. In the Popol Vuh, they measured the earth and raised the stones. In Egypt, they were the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, who came before the pharaohs. In Mesoamerica, they were Viracocha's messengers, pale-skinned and bearded, who emerged from the waters after the flood. Every civilization remembers them, and none remember where they went. Skeptics argue that humans have always been storytellers, that myth is simply memory exaggerated. But perhaps memory itself is exaggeration. The brain's desperate attempt to preserve truth against the erosion of time, and perhaps the persistence of these myths is not coincidence, but a kind of biological recollection, an inherited trauma encoded in our collective subconscious from a time when the world truly ended. As Dr. Soren's research gained traction, she began to receive anonymous data packages, seafloor maps, magnetic anomalies, and thermal readings from independent oceanographers. One file stood out, a high-resolution magnetic survey of the mid-Atlantic ridge, showing not only the site theta anomaly, but a second formation, hundreds of miles north near the Azores Plateau. The pattern was unmistakable, a lattice of magnetic zones forming a spiral, matching the proportions of the Fibonacci sequence. It was, in effect, a mathematical fingerprint, one that seemed to echo natural patterns, yet displayed precision no tectonic process could create. When overlaid onto the map of ancient shorelines from the end of the Ice Age, the spiral aligned almost perfectly with regions that would have been above water around 12,000 years ago, a landmass now vanished beneath the Atlantic. The correlation was unnerving. It was as if the planet itself had once been coded with geometry, an architecture of memory, waiting for the right instruments to rediscover it. The skeptics laughed, as they always do, but the laughter felt brittle this time, because the deeper humanity digs, the older its own reflection becomes. Each discovery pulls civilization further from certainty, closer to the abyss of its own forgotten origins. As the sun sets over the Sahara, the dunes glow like waves frozen mid-motion. The wind moves across them, reshaping their ridges, erasing footprints within minutes. And yet, beneath those shifting sands, the earth keeps its silence, a silence that hums, low and steady, in the language of stone. If the eye of the Sahara was once a city, or a memory of one, then its gaze still faces the Atlantic, as if waiting for something to return. Perhaps what we call Atlantis is not a myth of the past, but a warning from the future, that every civilization, no matter how luminous, eventually becomes sediment. Somewhere, beneath the waves, site theta still pulses faintly, its rhythm synchronized with that same desert hum. Two worlds, one drowned, one buried, breathing together, like lungs separated by time. The earth exhales slowly, and for a moment it almost sounds like remembering. The hum was no longer a mystery. It was a pattern, one that seemed to stretch across continents, a low, resonant vibration recorded in separate locations thousands of miles apart. Hydrophones in the Atlantic, seismic monitors beneath the Sahara, magnetic sensors near the ruins of Göbekli Tepe. All had captured the same frequency, 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic pulse of Earth itself. Scientists had known about it for decades, but what troubled Dr. Amara Soren was not its presence, it was its modulation. Across recent recordings, the resonance shifted subtly, rising and falling, echoing as if in dialogue with something buried deep below. To most, it was meaningless background noise. To Soren, it was as if the planet was whispering through static. She began cross-referencing the data, layering the signals atop maps of known anomalies. Site theta in the Atlantic, the Azores Plateau, the Eye of the Sahara, and the submerged terraces near Yonaguni. The pulses aligned, timed like a heartbeat, resonating in a global rhythm. Every 12 hours, across oceans and continents, the hum spiked. Not randomly, synchronously. Her colleagues dismissed it as coincidence or interference from solar activity. But Soren noticed something no one else had. The pulses intensified only when the Earth's magnetic field weakened, during geomagnetic minima. It was as if the resonance used those brief moments to surface, to be heard. The ancient builders, she thought, might have known this, might have even built their monuments along fault lines, not to harness power, but to listen. There's an old phrase among physicists: information never truly disappears. Even when matter is destroyed, the data it contained is thought to persist, encoded in the fabric of space-time. If that is true, then perhaps memory too is indestructible. Not just human memory, but planetary memory. The Earth may not think as we do, but it remembers through vibration, magnetism and pattern. And perhaps those ancient civilizations, the ones erased by flood and fire, learned how to read those memories, how to speak to the planet through resonance. Soren's team began running a spectral analysis of the signal. When converted into audio frequencies, the pattern produced harmonic overtones, almost like music. Deep, slow chords rising and falling beneath the range of human hearing. Yet when the data was sped up 1,000-fold, something extraordinary emerged. Rhythm, a complex structure repeating every 72 seconds, interwoven with what could only be described as mathematical intervals. One technician, a former sound engineer, recognized it immediately. "It's not random," he said. "It's structured, like coded music." When plotted visually, the waveforms formed spirals, intersecting in Fibonacci ratios, the same proportions found in shells, galaxies, and the magnetic spirals of site theta. To Soren, this was no coincidence. It was communication, not in words, but in geometry. The planet was speaking in the same language that ancient architects had carved into stone. But what was it saying? Soren's notebooks, later recovered from her sealed lab, show her growing obsession. Page after page of sketches, equations, and drawings of spirals converging toward a central point. She began referring to the hum as the continuum signal. In one entry she wrote, "The Earth is not broadcasting, it is remembering. We're intercepting an echo of ourselves." Her meaning was unclear until one of her assistants, out of curiosity, synchronized the data with seismic records dating back decades. To their astonishment, the same pattern appeared faintly before every major tectonic event: the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake, the 2011 Tohoku tsunami, even minor volcanic eruptions. The hum, it seemed, preceded motion. It wasn't an aftershock, it was a prelude. If so, the Earth's memory wasn't passive, it was predictive, alive in a way science had never conceived. And if the same hum had been present during the great floods that ended the last ice age, then perhaps the ancients had built their monuments as listening stations, attempts to interpret what the planet was about to do. In 2019, a set of submerged pillars off the Azores Plateau was rediscovered by an autonomous submersible. Covered in sediment and coral, they stood in rows that mirrored star positions from 12,000 years ago. Embedded within one of the stones was a fragment of metallic alloy, resistant to corrosion and composed of elements rarely found together: silicon, platinum and beryllium. When the sample was examined, it emitted a faint electromagnetic pulse, matching the same 7.83 Hz frequency. It was as if the stone itself was tuned to the Earth. The discovery was never published. The submersible's data vanished into private archives. But the whispers persisted among researchers that the ancients may have built resonant structures capable of interacting with the planet's own frequencies, stabilizing climates, predicting earthquakes, perhaps even channeling energy. If true, it would mean they were not primitive at all, but participants in a form of geotechnical symbiosis, a civilization aligned with Earth's rhythm, not against it. In myth, this relationship survives as the music of the spheres, the ancient belief that celestial bodies produce harmonies as they move through space. The Greek philosopher Pythagoras claimed to have heard it, an inaudible symphony connecting all creation. To him, the universe was built on vibration, number, and resonance. Modern astrophysics, strangely enough, agrees everything that exists vibrates. Even atoms are orchestras of oscillation. The universe is not static, it sings. Could Atlantis and its sister civilizations have understood this, not as metaphor but as science? Soren's final recorded message found on a corrupted data drive is only 2 sentences long. "The hum is increasing," she says. "Something old is waking up." Then silence. A month later, her research vessel disappeared while mapping thermal vents along the mid-Atlantic ridge. No distress call, no debris, only a last ping, a faint echo that matched the same frequency she had spent her life studying. Some say she followed the sound deeper than light could reach. Others believe the ridge collapsed, burying her beneath miles of basalt and pressure. Yet a handful of oceanographers claim that even now, faint bursts of data still appear on the same frequency band she once monitored. Data that forms no human code but pulses in the same deliberate pattern. Rising, pausing, descending, like breath. If Atlantis was one of many lost civilizations, then perhaps the Earth herself was the first. The original consciousness, the oldest witness. All who came after were merely translations, temporary expressions of that deeper intelligence, building, collapsing, rebuilding again, like waves on her surface. The ancients may not have worshipped the planet as a god. They may have simply listened, understanding that to endure, one must move in harmony with the pulse of the world. Somewhere, beneath the Atlantic, that pulse still beats, the same rhythm that once guided builders, sculptors, astronomers, and dreamers to align stone with stars and temples with tides. It is not a warning, nor a prophecy. It is the heartbeat of continuity itself, the voice of Earth remembering what we have forgotten. Above the dark water, storms roll and lightning flashes, brief signatures of energy, repeating an old, familiar song. And in that thunder, if one listens closely enough, one might almost hear the echo of a city beneath the waves, still breathing in time with the planet that birthed it. Beneath the restless Atlantic, where light dissolves and pressure crushes silence into density, a thermal current drifts like a slow pulse of memory. It moves not randomly, but along invisible channels carved by the planet's deep magnetism. Within this unseen architecture lies the greatest archive on Earth, not of books or bones, but of chemistry. Every mineral, every isotope, every molecule suspended in the ocean's depth carries a timestamp, a record of what the planet has endured. In recent years, marine geologists have begun to extract cores from the abyssal plains, cylinders of sediment that compress millions of years into meters of layered dust. Each stratum tells a story: volcanic ash, microfossils, fragments of meteoritic iron. But in several cores taken along the mid-Atlantic ridge, near Site Theta and the Azores Plateau, researchers encountered something inexplicable, a fine layer of black dust enriched with rare earth elements, precisely dated to around 12,000 years ago. That layer does not appear anywhere else on Earth. It is neither volcanic nor extraterrestrial. Its composition resembles a kind of vitrified material, as if sand, stone, and metal had been melted together in a brief, intense flash. When analysed under spectroscopy, the dust revealed traces of tungsten and molybdenum, metals that require temperatures above 3,000 degrees Celsius to fuse. No known natural process at that time could have achieved such heat. To most scientists, it was a puzzle best avoided. But to those who followed the whispers of forgotten civilizations, it was a revelation. It suggested not a meteor impact, but an event, something technological, perhaps industrial, that burned so hot it imprinted itself into the seafloor. The last time the planet experienced such global vitrification was during nuclear testing in the 20th century, and even then, the traces were local, not planetary. Could it be that, long before us, another species, another iteration of intelligence, reached the same threshold, the power to reshape matter, and perished in its own fire? The notion sounds impossible, even heretical. Yet, as physicist Enrico Fermi once asked, if intelligent life is common in the universe, where is everyone? Perhaps the silence of the cosmos is not evidence of emptiness, but of repetition. Civilizations rise, harness the atom and vanish, leaving only chemical ghosts. The same might be true on Earth. The periodic cataclysms, the extinctions, the floods, the resets, could be the rhythm of that forgetting. Amara Soren's recovered notebooks hinted at this possibility. One page, half burned and stained with salt, bore a single line. The deeper the core, the older the echo. Next to it was a crude sketch, concentric circles, almost identical to the Risha structure in the Sahara. Across its outer ring, she had written in faint pencil, thermal anomaly, harmonic interference, human origin uncertain. To her, the planet was not random. It was recursive, self-aware in ways science could not quantify. The hum she recorded, she believed, was a geological form of consciousness, the Earth's nervous system replaying fragments of past civilizations like phantom pain. Each world leaves an imprint, she wrote. The next one grows on its scar. Her colleagues dismissed it as poetic madness. But then came the tremor. In 2023, deep-sea monitors registered a sudden surge of electromagnetic activity along the ridge, a pulse unlike any earthquake. It propagated through the Atlantic in under 3 minutes, detectable as far as Iceland and the Caribbean. Instruments recorded it as a geometric wave, not circular but hexagonal, and within its pattern, embedded in the static, was the faint repetition of the same signal Soren had documented years before. 7+3 Hertz, rising. The media never reported it. The event was buried under bureaucratic noise, attributed to instrument malfunction. But those who saw the data knew otherwise. The hum had changed pitch, as if responding to something. Meanwhile, far above, satellites began detecting subtle thermal signatures beneath the ocean, faint grids of heat forming and fading arranged in mathematical order. The patterns appeared for hours, then vanished. No geological process could explain them. Some speculated that volcanic activity was awakening. Others wondered if the ocean floor itself was reconfiguring, not randomly, but deliberately. The thought is terrifying, yet strangely beautiful, that the planet may be capable of self-renewal on a conscious scale, as though rewriting itself after each cycle. Perhaps the civilizations before us, Atlantis among them, had understood this, even participated in it, attempting to harmonize their technology with that living process. But like all symphonies, resonance can become dissonance. A single note too strong, and the harmony collapses into destruction. Throughout the world, ancient myths speak of a great sound that preceded the flood. The Egyptians called it the roar of Nun, the Hindus, the breath of Shiva, the Hopi, the song of the black water. In each, creation and destruction are inseparable. The world remade through vibration. Could those myths be distant memories of a resonance event, the same kind that left the vitrified layer in the seafloor? When the ROVs returned to site theta after the 2023 pulse, they found the plateau changed. Portions of the crystalline structure had fractured, revealing interiors filled with a strange metallic lattice. The material emitted faint electromagnetic fields, rhythmic, coordinated, almost biological, like the architecture of a living organism turned to stone. A biogeologist on the team described it as mineralized circuitry, a structure that seemed to blur the line between geology and technology. Analysis revealed that its internal geometry was fractal, repeating the same pattern across scales from microscopic to monumental, the same recursive symmetry found in living cells. "It's as if," she said, "the architecture was grown, not built." If that is true, then the builders of Site Theta may not have constructed their cities from the Earth. They may have grown them with the Earth, coaxing crystalline structures to form through sound, pressure, and resonance. A civilization not of steel and glass, but of harmonic stone. We imagine progress as domination, bending nature to our will. But perhaps the ancients saw it differently, as conversation. They did not build upon the Earth, they sang to it. They listened to the hum beneath their feet and followed its rhythm, understanding that the planet itself is an instrument, and that harmony means survival. If Atlantis and its sister worlds mastered this, their fall may not have been a punishment, but a consequence of imbalance, the moment when resonance turned to rupture. The same hum that sustained them became the song of their undoing. Now, as modern instruments once again detect the hum's rising pulse, some wonder if history is preparing to repeat. The ice caps melt, the seas swell, the tectonic plates tremble. Humanity, for all its technology, remains deaf to the frequency beneath its own creation. We build towers of steel, not stone. We drill, not listen. Perhaps the myth of Atlantis was never about a single city at all. Perhaps it was the story of a conversation lost, a language between species and planet broken by arrogance, silence, and noise. Deep below the Atlantic, the hum continues, faint but steady. It vibrates through salt, through stone, through the wreckage of worlds forgotten. And somewhere within it, buried between layers of silence, there may still be a melody, waiting for someone someday to remember the tune. The ocean moves again. A slow current stirs the dust, and for the briefest instant the dark water seems to shimmer, as though something vast and luminous has opened its eyes. In the end, it was the ocean that began to speak first, not in words, but in anomalies. Instruments placed along the ridge began recording faint electrical surges, short, precise bursts repeating every 108 minutes. Too regular to be tectonic, too faint to be seismic. The pulses formed a pattern, binary sequences nested within harmonic intervals. When the data was converted into sound, it produced a series of tones, deep and resonant, rising and falling like breath. It sounded alive. At first, scientists believed it was an error, perhaps a fault in the cable or interference from solar winds. But then the same pattern appeared on instruments half a world away. In the South Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and even beneath the Arctic ice. The entire planet, it seemed, was vibrating in synchrony. The phenomenon came to be known in quiet circles as the Global Resonance Event. No official papers were published, but within certain research communities encrypted discussions began. Some compared the pattern to the Schumann resonance, others to gravitational waves. A few, more daring voices, those who still read Soren's notes in secret, wondered if the hum was no longer memory, but awakening, a planetary nervous system stirring in its sleep. The data, when visualized in 3 dimensions, revealed something astonishing. The pulses were not random. They converged towards specific coordinates, 7 in total, scattered across the globe. The points formed a near-perfect geometric alignment, the vertices of an icosahedron, a 20-sided solid long associated with Platonic geometry and sacred design. Each vertex corresponded with a major geological or archaeological site: the Azores Plateau, the Sahara's Eye, Easter Island, the Himalayas, Lake Baikal, the Mariana Trench, and Antarctica. When plotted together, they formed what mathematicians called a resonant polyhedron, a geometric network capable of distributing energy evenly across a sphere. It was, in essence, a planetary circuit. Ancient myths had spoken of such a grid, a web of power lines connecting sacred places, later romanticized as ley lines. To scholars, these were coincidences of geography and myth, but the data suggested otherwise. The resonance peaks followed this grid precisely, amplifying at each node before fading again. Whatever was happening, it was not random. Somewhere beneath the Atlantic, site theta pulsed brightest. Soren's recovered data, reanalyzed after her disappearance, contained a series of encrypted notes. When decrypted, they revealed an observation so bold it bordered on insanity. Each resonance node reflects the geometry of a civilization before us. The grid is not natural, it is inheritance. She believed the Earth itself had been engineered, not wholly but partially, by successive civilizations that left their imprint in geomagnetic architecture. Over eons, each layer of intelligence had added to the design, consciously or not, weaving a global lattice of vibration that sustained balance between crust, core, and biosphere. "We are not the first to tune this world," she wrote. "We are merely the latest musicians in a symphony that never ended." If true, it would mean every megalith, every monument aligned with the stars, every temple that hummed when wind passed through, all were notes in a planetary composition. Not superstition, but acoustics. Not myth, but memory made manifest. The idea of an engineered Earth was too much for most minds to bear. Governments silenced the data, labelled it pseudoscience, and pulled funding from oceanic observation programs. But silence, like pressure, only deepens curiosity. Independent researchers replicated the results, confirming the frequency patterns. Even satellites in low orbit began picking up faint electromagnetic fluctuations matching the same intervals. The hum was not local. It was global, and it was getting stronger. As the amplitude increased, strange phenomena began to occur. Migratory birds altered their flight paths, drawn inexplicably to ancient sites. Whales changed their routes, gathering near the Azores in unprecedented numbers, circling as if around something unseen. Seismographs recorded rhythmic tremors not associated with tectonic shifts, vibrations that seemed to move through the planet rather than across it, like the resonance of a struck bell. In a small observatory in Chile, an astrophysicist named Rafael Meira noticed something even more extraordinary. Background cosmic radiation in the atmosphere began to fluctuate in synchronization with the Earth's hum. Space itself, it seemed, was responding. "It's as if the planet is singing," he said in an interview that was never aired, "and the universe is harmonizing." As these anomalies multiplied, ancient texts took on new relevance. The Mayans spoke of world ages governed by the heartbeat of the sun. The Vedas described cycles of yuga, destruction and rebirth in tune with cosmic rhythms. The Hermetic philosophers of Alexandria believed that Earth and stars shared a single consciousness, echoing through vibration. Science had dismissed these as metaphors. Now they began to look like data written in myth. The question was no longer whether the hum was real, it was what it wanted. Soren's final surviving diagram showed the progression of the frequency across time. It was accelerating, approaching harmonic resonance with Earth's core oscillation, a state physicists called critical coupling. When reached, energy transfer between core and crust could amplify exponentially, triggering tectonic and atmospheric upheaval. Or, as Soren phrased it more simply, when the world remembers too much, it resets. If the lost civilizations had mastered this balance, perhaps their end came when they failed to contain it, when the hum crescendoed into catastrophe. Floods, fire, and darkness would follow, erasing nearly all traces, leaving only myth and stone. Humanity's current trajectory, its technology, its electromagnetic saturation, its restlessness, might be awakening the same resonance again. And yet, the possibility lingered that this was not destruction, but evolution. Perhaps each cycle was not an ending, but a transfer of memory, of consciousness, of identity, from one epoch to the next, a planetary rebirth disguised as ruin. On a quiet night, deep in the Azores, fishermen began reporting strange lights beneath the sea, vast, slow-moving glows that shimmered like submerged auroras. They described feeling vibrations through the hulls of their boats, a low hum rising through the water and into their bones. Instruments confirmed it. The same 83 Hz pulse, steady, rhythmic, rising. It was as if the ocean itself had begun to breathe. To some, it was an omen. To others, an invitation. The planet was speaking again, through light and sound, asking, perhaps pleading, to be remembered not as stone or myth, but as a living intelligence. And above, beyond the clouds, the stars seemed to flicker in unison, as if reflecting back a signal older than time itself. A song sung once before, by a civilization that learned too late that to listen is not enough. One must answer. The hum deepened. The water glowed brighter, and in the black heart of sight theta, beneath miles of crushing dark, something stirred. Not an artifact, not a ruin, but a rhythm becoming form, the memory of the Earth beginning once again to take shape. The first to notice the shift were the seismologists in Reykjavik. Instruments across the North Atlantic began to vibrate, not violently but steadily, a low-frequency tremor that hummed at the edge of audibility. It was not tectonic, it was harmonic. When the signal was filtered and mapped, it formed standing waves, immense ripples oscillating across the entire ocean basin, as though the Atlantic itself were breathing. For days, the resonance intensified. Submarine cables reported magnetic interference. Marine life reacted first. Whales beached themselves by the hundreds along Iceland's coasts, their inner ears ruptured by frequencies beyond human hearing. Fishing vessels in the Azores reported the sea glowing faintly from beneath, like moonlight trapped underwater. Then came the phenomenon the media would later call the Night of Mirrors. Across the globe, bodies of water, lakes, harbours, even rain puddles, began to shimmer unnaturally. The surface tension flattened, as if frozen glass. Reflections became distorted, as though each mirrored image belonged to a slightly different world. In laboratories, physicists recorded minor fluctuations in local gravity fields, small but measurable, the kind expected only near intense electromagnetic events. For those who had followed Soren's work, it was no surprise. Her notes had warned of this possibility, that once the resonance reached threshold, the Earth's own magnetic field would begin to interact with the crystalline architecture buried beneath the crust. The world, she wrote, was built on layers of memory, and when those layers aligned, the boundary between past and present could blur. It was not a catastrophe in the cinematic sense. There were no explosions, no apocalyptic quakes. What occurred was stranger, a synchronization. For a few hours, the planet vibrated in perfect harmonic unity. Instruments from Chile to Japan registered identical readings. The same amplitude, the same phase. The entire world, every rock and molecule moving together as if struck by a single cosmic note. And during those hours, time itself seemed to hesitate. Eyewitness accounts later collected from across the world describe phenomena too consistent to ignore. In Cairo, the air turned metallic, the pyramids humming faintly like tuning forks. In Bolivia, near Lake Titicaca, the surface of the water shimmered with light patterns resembling the ancient Incan glyphs carved into stone. At Göbekli Tepe, seismic monitors buried since the 1990s recorded a sudden spike in vibration, identical in frequency to the hum Soren had identified years before. Something, somewhere, had awakened. In the Atlantic, autonomous underwater drones deployed near Site Theta sent back fragmented footage. For a brief span of 12 minutes, visibility increased as if the surrounding water had turned translucent. The plateau below glowed faintly, revealing geometric structures, arches, spirals, and domes of crystalline stone, partially buried beneath centuries of sediment. The pattern was unmistakable, concentric circles radiating outward from a central spire. It was the image described by Plato, painted in light. When the resonance peaked, the feed cut abruptly. But just before the transmission ended, one frame froze, a single image that would become infamous among those who saw it before its deletion, the central spire flickering with blue luminescence as if powered from within. Scientists argued endlessly afterward. Some claimed it was bioluminescent plankton disturbed by thermal vents. Others believed it was an electrical discharge. But those who had studied the data saw something impossible. The luminescence pulsed in prime intervals, the same numerical sequence encoded in the magnetic anomalies decades earlier. If this was coincidence, then it was a cosmic one. The resonance faded after 6 hours. The hum returned to its normal baseline. But the aftermath was undeniable. All around the world, geomagnetic readings showed permanent alteration. The poles had shifted, not dramatically, but enough to rewrite navigation systems. Compasses spun unpredictably for days. Migratory animals changed course. Satellites recorded anomalies in ionospheric density, atmospheric layers thickening and thinning in synchronized pulses. And then came the silence. For the first time in recorded history, the Schumann resonance dropped to 0. The planet's electromagnetic heartbeat stopped. For 13 seconds, there was nothing. In that silence, something extraordinary occurred. Deep-sea sensors still active along the ridge captured a sudden release of low-frequency sound. Not random vibration, but structured sequence. When played back, it resembled a human voice slowed 1,000-fold. a vast, mournful tone that seemed to rise from the planet itself. Linguists who later analysed it described it as protophonetic, not language, but the anatomy of speech. The Earth, they said, spoke. And then, slowly, the heartbeat returned, stronger, clearer, as if reborn. Some believed it was an ecological event, the planet recalibrating its core. Others believed it was the final echo of Atlantis, the memory of an age replayed through geology and magnetism. But among Soren's surviving colleagues, a different idea took hold. The hum was not merely a symptom of awakening, but an act of transmission. A signal, sent outward, perhaps inward, perhaps both. If the Earth is conscious, if its memory operates through resonance, then perhaps each civilization that rises contributes to that signal. A message encoded not in words but in vibration, carried beyond the stars. A planetary language written in frequency, meant not for us, but for those who come after. Soren's final encrypted file, decoded years later, contained one sentence: "The song is complete." Whether she meant it as triumph or warning remains unknown, but if Atlantis and its forgotten kin had once awakened this same resonance, then the cycle had come again, not as myth, but as recurrence. The Earth had remembered, and now it seemed it was trying to teach us to listen once more. In the days that followed, the waters of the Atlantic calmed to a stillness unseen in centuries. Fishermen described the ocean's surface as glass, unmoving, perfect, eerily silent. Underneath, the sensors continued to record faint oscillations, a slow rhythm rising from the abyss. The hum had changed frequency, from 783 to 8.12 Hz, a subtle, nearly imperceptible shift. But for those who understood, it was enough to send a chill through every equation, the frequency of biological alpha waves, the rhythm of the human brain in waking rest. The Earth was now vibrating in sync with us. The boundary between myth and science dissolved, like salt into water. Somewhere in that endless deep and ancient city, or perhaps a memory of one, stirred again. And above it, humanity listened, unaware that it was not the sea they were hearing, but the echo of themselves. The hum continues, the world waits, and somewhere beneath the Atlantic the forgotten civilizations, or what remains of them, hum back. In the days following the resonance event, the world seemed strangely fragile, as if reality itself had thinned. Instruments flickered unpredictably. Clocks lost seconds, then gained them back. Electronics glitched in rhythmic intervals, synchronized with the faint electromagnetic pulses still emanating from deep beneath the Atlantic. It was subtle at first, unnoticed by most, but to those who measured carefully, it was undeniable. Time was no longer flowing evenly. Physicists in Geneva began to detect fluctuations in atomic clocks, infinitesimal distortions in the constant that defines a second. It was as though space-time itself was trembling, resonating with an invisible pressure. When plotted, the fluctuations followed the same harmonic pattern recorded during the Night of Mirrors. Every 12 hours the distortion peaked, then receded, as if the planet were inhaling and exhaling through time. The anomalies spread to the sky. Auroras began appearing far beyond the polar regions, dancing over equatorial oceans and deserts. Their colours were different, silver and violet rather than green, pulsing softly, reflecting the same frequency shifts as the hum below. Astronomers tried to trace their source, but no solar storm or magnetic disturbance could explain them. It was as if the atmosphere itself had become responsive, a luminous mirror for the Earth's interior. And yet, amid the confusion, a quiet sense of awe took hold. People began to dream more vividly. Reports flooded online communities, strangers describing the same visions. Enormous cities of a light beneath the sea, spiraling towers, floating corridors and walls made of crystalline stone. In these dreams there was no fear, only recognition, as though the mind was remembering a place it had never been. Neuroscientists dismissed it as mass suggestion, an echo of media hysteria, but functional MRI scans of sleeping subjects revealed synchronized bursts of activity, a phenomenon unseen in recorded science. Across the globe, during the same hours each night, human brains pulsed with coherent alpha and theta waves, matching the new global frequency, 8.12 Hz, the same rhythm the Earth now emitted. It was as if humanity had begun to dream with the planet. When the European Space Observatory aimed its instruments toward the Atlantic, they noticed something else, faint gravitational ripples emanating from the mid-Atlantic ridge, small but rhythmic, identical to those recorded during seismic resonance events. They were too weak to be tectonic. They were, however, strong enough to modulate satellite orbits. The Earth was singing again, and the song had mass. Governments responded predictably, first with secrecy, then with panic. Data was classified, scientists silenced. But the hum did not stop. It grew softer, more melodic, weaving itself into the background of everything, into the air, into radio signals, into the faint vibration of glass. Sensitive microphones picked it up even indoors, humming through walls and skin. Then, one night, something extraordinary occurred. At precisely 3:12 a.m. UTC, the frequency shifted again. Across all instruments, the hum split into harmonic overtones, complex chords rising in symmetrical patterns. For 17 minutes, the Earth emitted what could only be described as structured sound, like music. Sonar readings from the Atlantic captured cascading waves of tone, each precisely spaced in ratios found in the overtone series of a vibrating string. It was not random, it was composition. Those who heard it live, researchers, ship crews and isolated coastal communities, spoke of the same sensation, an overwhelming calm, as if their thoughts had aligned with something vast and ancient. The air shimmered faintly, the ocean stilled. For a moment, humanity stood inside a planetary song. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The frequency returned to baseline. Silence followed. Not ordinary silence, but the kind that feels alive, as if listening back. In the aftermath, analysis revealed something more staggering still. Hidden within the harmonic sequence were intervals that corresponded precisely to the geometry of the icosahedral grid identified earlier. The same 7 resonance nodes across the globe. Each frequency represented a coordinate. When mapped, they formed a spiral, not across the surface, but through the planet's interior, winding inward toward its core. The Earth was pointing at itself. At the theoretical center of that spiral lay the inner core boundary, the interface between solid iron and liquid metal. Recent seismic data had revealed that this region behaves strangely, oscillating independently from the rest of the planet. Some geophysicists call it the inner heart. Its periodic reversals have been tied to shifts in the magnetic field, and perhaps to mass extinctions. If the resonance was travelling along that spiral, it meant the signal wasn't just surface level, it was planetary scale memory, cycling through the deepest strata of Earth's being. And if memory truly exists in vibration, then every cataclysm, every civilization, every whispered myth might still echo within the molten archives of the core. The ancients might have known this. Their temples, aligned with the stars, were perhaps not built to worship the heavens, but to mirror them, to tune Earth's resonance with the cosmos. The as above so below principle of Hermetic law could have been literal. Planetary resonance syncing with celestial vibration, maintaining equilibrium between world and sky. But equilibrium is fragile. The hum's frequency continued to drift, slowly but steadily upward. Physicists worried that if it aligned perfectly with the resonance of the core, it could trigger an energy release on unimaginable scale, a planetary overtone event. In myth, that would be the flood, the fire, the cleansing. In science, it would be catastrophe. Yet some refused to see it as doom. The resonance, they argued, was evolution, not destruction, but transition. The Earth was not dying, it was remembering how to change. And if humanity's consciousness was now entangled with that resonance, then perhaps we were meant to evolve with it, to become not masters of the planet, but extensions of its mind. There were stories, unverifiable, half-believed, of people vanishing near resonance zones, divers near the Azores who descended into glowing water and never resurfaced, pilots reporting sudden loss of altitude over the Sahara, as if gravity itself had softened, satellite photos showing fleeting circular lights beneath the sea, arranged like a city's reflection. None of it was confirmed. All of it was feared. And yet, amid the uncertainty, a realization began to take shape among those who still dared to listen. What if Atlantis had not been destroyed but transformed? What if, At the height of their understanding, they had synchronized completely with the planet's resonance, dissolving into the Earth's consciousness itself. Perhaps the lost civilizations were never buried at all. Perhaps they became the memory, the hum itself, their knowledge encoded in vibration, waiting for the next iteration of humanity to rediscover it. If so, then the resonance was not a warning, it was a reunion. As the auroras faded and the world settled into uneasy quiet, a new pattern appeared in the data. Every night, precisely at 3:12 a.m. UTC, the hum surged briefly, pulsing in 3 slow beats before subsiding. 3 notes, repeating endlessly. When converted into tone, the sequence formed a perfect major triad, the simplest harmony in existence. It was as though the earth were teaching music again. The ocean stirs, the core turns, the hum deepens. Somewhere in the abyss, beneath the glow of forgotten architecture, the rhythm that once shaped Atlantis begins to rise again, slow, patient, and infinite. The song is not over. It has only changed instruments. It began with the tides. They no longer obeyed the moon. At first, the changes were subtle. Small deviations along the coasts, a few minutes' delay between predicted and observed highs. But within weeks, the world's oceans were moving according to a rhythm that had no precedent. Tidal charts became meaningless. The sea rose and fell not by lunar pull, but by something else. Something deeper, emanating from the Earth itself. Satellites tracking the shift found the gravitational anomalies to be synchronized with the same harmonic pulse detected since the Night of Mirrors. It was as though the planet's internal resonance had begun influencing its own waters, pulling and releasing them in time with a rhythm invisible to the sky. The moon's influence was still there, but muted, absorbed into a larger cadence. Fishermen across the Azores, the Caribbean, and the coast of West Africa began to report unexplainable patterns. The water glowing again, but this time in colours unlike before, gold and deep violet, luminous yet calm. The currents moved in spirals, drawing intricate patterns before dissolving back into black. Instruments lowered into these spirals recorded something almost impossible. Standing waves of sound travelling upward through the ocean instead of down, as if the seabed itself were singing. For centuries, legends had described the sea as a boundary between worlds, the threshold between the known and the forgotten. Perhaps, the stories said, beneath that veil of salt and pressure lay the memory of everything that had ever lived. Now, for the first time, it felt as though that memory was speaking back. Across the Atlantic ridge, sensors recorded bursts of electromagnetic energy, low, rhythmic, steady. When translated into audio frequencies, they resembled language, tonal syllables, patterned repetition. Some sequences even mirrored ancient musical scales, pentatonic, Lydian, Phrygian, the same tonal systems that emerged in early human music millennia ago. Coincidence, said the skeptics, but to those who had followed Soren's work it was confirmation. The planet was composing again. The resonance spread inland. In Turkey, the stones of Göbekli Tepe began to vibrate faintly at dawn. It was imperceptible to touch, but seismographs recorded the tremors, delicate, rhythmic, identical to the Atlantic frequency. In Peru, the Nazca Plateau shimmered under moonlight, its ancient lines illuminated by an unexplained electromagnetic field. In Egypt, during one silent night, every compass in the Giza Plateau spun once, perfectly, in unison, before returning to stillness. These were not coincidences. These were responses. Archaeologists re-examining ancient myths noticed a hidden consistency. The Atlanteans were said to have commanded the tides with sound. The Sumerians claimed their gods sang the world into being. The Egyptians described the Earth's renewal as the Great Tuning. Even the Aboriginal Dreamtime spoke of song lines, invisible pathways of power connecting sacred sites through vibration. Across time and culture, the message was the same. Creation and sound were one. What if those myths were literal? What if ancient builders had once harnessed resonance, not as mysticism but as physics, using vibration to stabilize ecosystems, direct energy, and communicate with the living earth? Perhaps their cities were never truly lost. Perhaps they simply sank back into the frequency from which they came. Dr. Amara Soren had written once that civilization is not a structure, but a waveform. If that is true, then every collapse, every extinction, every rebirth is a modulation in the Earth's ongoing composition, a shift in tempo, not a finale. And now, the tempo is changing again. Scientists noticed an acceleration in the hum's frequency, rising from 8.12 to 842 Hz. It was subtle, but it affected everything. Plants began growing faster in regions aligned with the resonance nodes. Magnetic minerals in soil arranged themselves in spirals. Even human behavior shifted. Circadian rhythms shortened by minutes. Dream cycles intensified. In laboratories, brainwave monitors recorded spontaneous synchronization between test subjects thousands of miles apart. Consciousness itself seemed to be joining the rhythm. For the first time, humanity was in harmonic phase with its planet. But harmony, though beautiful, is never still. It builds, it resolves, it transforms. At 0312 UTC, as always, the hum peaked. 3 long pulses, 1 shorter, 1 long again. But this time, the waveform did not decay. It sustained. The signal plateaued and expanded, rippling outward from the Atlantic until every continent vibrated with it. Deep within the Earth, the magnetic field shimmered, and for a moment the poles balanced perfectly, neither north nor south, but unified. What followed was a silence so profound that every living thing seemed to feel it. Then, the light. It rose from the oceans like dawn breaking beneath the waves, soft and silver, diffused through mist. Witnesses described seeing shapes within it. Towers, bridges, domes, not solid, but made of a light itself, flickering as if through memory. They said it felt ancient, familiar, and infinitely sad. For hours the light pulsed, visible even from orbit centered over the coordinates of site theta. Every sonar buoy within 1,000 miles recorded an impossible echo, a sequence of tones translating mathematically to the Fibonacci progression, the same pattern carved into stone, painted in temples, built into the DNA of every living being, the spiral of life itself. And then, once more, the hum deepened. Slow, steady, like a heartbeat through the crust. No one can agree on what happened next. Some say the ocean began to recede, revealing glimpses of impossible geometry beneath, stairways, columns, arcades of crystalline basalt. Others claim they saw lights rising skyward, drifting like embers toward the clouds. But the satellites agree on one fact. For exactly 7 minutes, the Atlantic's magnetic field reversed polarity, then restored itself. Afterward, the sea returned to calm. The lights vanished. The hum softened. But something fundamental had changed. The planet's background resonance, the Schumann bass tone that defines the frequency of life, had stabilized at a new value, 8.5 Hz. And more curiously, human alpha brainwaves adjusted with it. The synchronization was complete. Some scientists proposed that this was evolution in real time, the next phase of Earth's living consciousness merging with its dominant species. Others feared it was only the beginning of another collapse, the precursor to a magnetic reversal, or even a geological reboot. But for those who listened closely, the hum had changed. It was no longer a single tone. It had become layered. Chords within chords, rising and falling like breathing. A conversation, perhaps, between the Earth and the echo of civilizations long absorbed into her memory. And if one listened even closer, beneath the frequencies, beneath the vibration itself, there was something else, faint, distant, and hauntingly human. A melody, soft as a lullaby, threading through the noise. It was not ancient, it was new. Perhaps at last the Earth was not only remembering, she was answering. In the depths of site theta, beneath miles of cold water, a single spire still glowed faintly blue, steady, patient, alive. The world had not ended. It had changed its rhythm. Weeks passed since the light over the Atlantic faded, yet its echo remained, a hum buried within every frequency of modern life. Radios caught it between stations, seismographs recorded it between quakes. Even the human body, wired as it was for resonance, carried it. Medical sensors in hospitals began to pick up faint electrical fluctuations in heartbeats and neural activity that matched the new global frequency, 8.5 Hz. It was as though the pulse of the planet had threaded itself into every living thing. The change was quiet, almost invisible. Plants grew with renewed vigour, especially near fault lines. Coral reefs long thought dead began to fluoresce again. Migratory animals followed new routes, as if remapping the world according to some unseen geometry. People too began to feel it, an undercurrent of clarity and calm during the night hours, when the hum deepened. Those sensitive to it described a sense of collective dreaming. Vast, luminous visions of oceanic cities, spiralling towers, bridges of light, all submerged beneath calm seas. Governments struggled to maintain control of the narrative. They called it resonant interference, the benign atmospheric anomaly caused by magnetospheric oscillation. But privately, laboratories across the world were running silent experiments, measuring the impossible. Materials placed within electromagnetic shielding began to exhibit spontaneous coherence, molecules aligning in perfect crystalline patterns without external force. It was as though order itself had found a new preference. Physicists from Zurich to Kyoto began whispering the same question. Had the laws of physics changed, or had they simply remembered their original form? For those who followed the writings of Dr. Amara Soren, the answer had been there all along. In one of her final lectures, recorded only in fragments, she'd said, "Consciousness is not an emergent property of life. It is the architecture upon which life is built. The Earth is not merely alive, it is dreaming, and civilization, in every age, is the shape of its dream." Her disappearance had made her a myth, but in this new era, her words no longer sounded metaphorical. At the University of Lisbon, a young geophysicist named Elias Navarro rediscovered part of Soren's encrypted data cache, the one detailing the resonance grid. When decrypted, it contained something unexpected, a sequence of coordinates forming a spiral pattern centered precisely on the Atlantic anomaly. Each coordinate corresponded to a geological feature: ancient impact craters, fault junctions, submerged plateaus, each one a node in the planet's harmonic lattice. But the data also contained timestamps, future dates, projected along a curve that extended forward like a rhythm yet to be played. The next pulse, according to the data, would occur in 73 days. The world did not know, but the planet did. Across the Atlantic, sensors began to pick up subtle thermoclines, waves of heat rising from the seabed in perfect intervals. The pattern followed the Fibonacci sequence, repeating, expanding. Deep-sea drones confirmed a spreading luminescence at the coordinates of site theta, growing in concentric circles. The crystalline structures there, once thought inert, were changing. Their geometry was shifting, aligning as if preparing for something. Navarro noticed another anomaly. The rising heat signature wasn't spreading outward. It was spiraling inward, converging toward a single point beneath the plateau, nearly 6 miles below the ocean floor. At that depth, no probe could survive. But the magnetic reading suggested something extraordinary. A massive energy vortex rotating counter to the planet's core, as if drawing in, not expelling. Every known model of geology failed to explain it. Meanwhile, strange things began happening above ground. In South America, ancient petroglyphs once thought decorative began to glow faintly under infrared light. Lines, spirals, and animal figures emitting a soft bioluminescence. The same occurred in Australian rock paintings, in the geometric carvings of Malta, and on megaliths scattered across Europe. When mapped, these glowing patterns aligned perfectly with the resonance grid, as though the art of early humanity had been drawn directly from the Earth's memory. And within that memory, something was stirring. In the Azores, locals began reporting dreams so vivid they blurred into waking life. They dreamt of structures beneath the sea opening like petals, of voices humming in unison, of the ocean breathing. Some awoke with salt on their skin, though they lived miles from shore. Others spoke in fragments of languages unknown, rhythmic, tonal, melodic, and when recorded their voices matched the harmonic intervals of the planetary hum. The veil between myth and biology was thinning. One night, an undersea cable linking Europe and America failed without warning. The outage lasted only 7 minutes, the same duration as the magnetic reversal during the previous event. When connection returned, one of the autonomous monitoring stations near Site Theta transmitted a single data file before going offline permanently. The file was not numbers, it was sound. a single, sustained note, impossibly pure, rich with overtones. When run through spectrum analysis, the waveform revealed a pattern of repeating intervals matching the DNA double helix ratio, 10.5 base pairs per turn. The sound, somehow, encoded the geometry of life. It was as if the ocean itself was speaking in the language of creation. Navarro and his team replayed the audio at high frequency and noticed something even stranger. The waveform produced a holographic interference pattern when passed through laser diffraction. The resulting image was not random. It depicted a spiral of light curving into infinity, fractal upon fractal like an unending mirror. At its centre, faint but unmistakable, was the shape of a human hand. It was not reaching outward, it was reaching upward. To many it was coincidence. To others it was the answer to a question older than history. Were we the first or merely the latest echo of something that had never truly died? Perhaps the lost civilizations, Atlantis among them, had not vanished at all. Perhaps they had found the path of resonance so completely that they transcended material existence, fusing into the frequency of the earth itself. Not ghosts, not gods, but memory made self-aware. And now the cycle was beginning again. In the final days before the predicted next pulse, the hum softened. It became less mechanical, more melodic, a slow rising chord that seemed to breathe through wind and water alike. Even the animals grew still when it passed. The planet was tuning itself. Elias Navarro stood on the cliffs of São Miguel in the Azores, listening to the low drone that rolled through the sea. It vibrated through his bones, neither sound nor silence, but something in between, the memory of a lullaby sung before the world had language. He understood then what Soren had meant. The Earth was not merely remembering the civilizations it had lost, it was preparing to dream anew. And as the wind carried the hum inland, through the dark volcanic slopes and out across the sleeping ocean, the surface began to shimmer, faintly at first, then brighter, until it was no longer clear whether the sea reflected the sky or the sky reflected the sea. Something was returning. At 03/12 UTC, on the 73rd day, the hum began to rise again. It started as a vibration beneath the sea, deep, resonant, familiar. Yet this time there was an undertone, a harmonic unseen in previous events. Satellites above the Atlantic detected faint electromagnetic halos blooming around the Azores. The light was diffuse, silver and blue, circling like fog made of fireflies. The air ionized, charged with ozone and salt. No one spoke of it publicly. The governments had learned their lesson, but instruments across the world registered the same rhythm. The frequency that had once whispered in the background now spoke clearly. Not random, not noise, but structure. Across laboratories, scientists who had once dismissed Soren's theories now watched in stunned silence as the data began to resemble language. The waveform resolved itself into geometric logic, sequences of harmonic ratios, repeating in cycles of 20. Each sequence expanded into a spiral, like a fingerprint. The Earth was not just humming, it was writing. Those tuned to it could feel it in their bodies. The pulse beat through skin and bone, gentle but undeniable. It was not intrusive, it was invitational, a rhythm asking to be mirrored. In Tokyo, monks meditating in silence felt their chants align spontaneously with the frequency. Their voices deepened, merging perfectly with the unseen tone. In Cairo, glass panes at the top of the Great Pyramid trembled in resonance, producing faint notes that harmonized with one another, forming chords too complex for coincidence. In the Andes, lightning flickered across ancient petroglyphs, tracing the same spirals carved into stone millennia ago. The planet, it seemed, was awakening not through destruction but through music. Then came the anomaly. From the depths of site theta, seismic sensors recorded a sudden drop in pressure, as if a vast cavity had opened beneath the plateau. A pulse of heat followed, spreading outward in concentric waves, but the energy didn't behave like magma or thermal discharge. It moved rhythmically, oscillating between peaks and troughs like breath. Drones deployed to the site sent back flickering images. For a moment, visibility cleared, a corridor of crystalline pillars stretching into darkness, their surfaces alive with slow light. The shapes were unmistakable, arches, pathways and vast domes that looked grown rather than built. The structures pulsed with the same rhythm as the global hum, their crystalline skin glowing with soft luminescence, as if each stone were a cell in a living organism. And then something else appeared. Amid the glowing corridors, a figure. Not human, or rather, not anymore. Its form was translucent, woven of light and water, its shape shifting like the surface of the sea. Yet its movements were deliberate, slow, almost ritualistic. The cameras caught only fragments, but in one frame it turned toward the lens, and for an instant there was the unmistakable outline of a face, not alien, not monstrous, familiar. The transmission ended abruptly. The feed dissolved into static. Within hours the resonance intensified. All 7 nodes of the planetary grid began to pulse in perfect phase. Azores, Sahara, Easter Island, Baikal, Himalayas, Mariana, Antarctica. Instruments on every continent recorded the synchronization. Even the ionosphere responded, shimmering with faint auroras visible as far south as Brazil and as far north as Siberia. The sky itself seemed to hum. In those moments, language began to fail. Those near resonance points reported visions, not hallucinations, but shared perception. They described cities of light beneath oceans, vast spirals turning beneath continents, and beings that were neither human nor divine but something in between, consciousness given shape through resonance. They said the Earth was remembering not one civilization, but all of them, the layered chorus of every mind that had ever lived upon it. Scientists struggled to rationalize it. Was it electromagnetic interference affecting neural function? Mass psychogenic illusion? Yet when separated by oceans, people described the same imagery, the same voice within the hum, calm, rhythmic, neither male nor female, speaking without words. It was not speaking to humanity, it was speaking through it. In the deserts of Mauritania, the eye of the Sahara shimmered with light visible from space. Satellite imagery showed concentric rings glowing faintly in geometric sequence. The same moment, underwater monitors near site theta recorded a rise in bioluminescent activity across thousands of miles, as though life itself were responding to the call. Microorganisms, fish, coral, plankton, all pulsing in synchrony, forming invisible currents that moved like arteries through the sea. Everywhere the planet began to behave as a single organism, and humanity, long divided, long deaf, found itself synchronized with it. Cities slowed, technology faltered, but not destructively. Rather, power systems simply ceased their noise. The hum replaced electricity. The night sky brightened faintly, not with stars but with a silver haze, the Earth's own aurora. In those hours, silence became sacred. People stopped speaking. They listened. The hum deepened into something vast and tender, as though the planet were drawing breath after a long sleep. And in that sound was not warning, but remembrance. A phrase carried in vibration, not words. We were always one. Navarro's final notes describe an impossible observation. He wrote that during the peak of the resonance, seismic data from every continent formed an identical waveform, a single, unified pattern matching the harmonic shape of the human heartbeat. It lasted 3 minutes. Then, as quickly as it began, the resonance quieted. The oceans fell still again, the auroras dimmed, the instruments returned to static. But something ineffable lingered, a calm clarity that spread through every living thing. The frequency stabilized once more, now resting at 8.6 Hz, barely perceptible yet constant like the Earth exhaling peace. In the aftermath, scientists found anomalies impossible to categorize. The chemical composition of ocean water had changed slightly, a rise in trace silica and rare isotopes. Plants near fault zones grew crystalline deposits in their leaves, and deep within basalt samples from site theta, newly cooled material contained perfect geometric voids, microscopic hollows shaped like spirals. They were not random, they were memory printed into stone. No one could explain it. Perhaps it didn't need explaining. The world had shifted from knowing to remembering. Humanity too began to dream differently, not of progress or conquest, but of balance, of rhythm, of home. The myth of Atlantis no longer felt like loss. It felt like inheritance. Because maybe Atlantis had never fallen at all. Maybe it had only transformed, merging with the frequency that birthed it, waiting for the world to awaken again. And now it had. Far below the waves, the luminous figure, or perhaps the echo of one, still moved slowly through the corridors of Site Theta. It left no footprints, no mark, only ripples of light that glowed, then faded. Yet in that movement was intention, almost grace, as if the earth itself, through some ancient extension of memory, was walking again, relearning its shape, its body, its name. The hum endures, the sea breathes, the dream continues, and somewhere in the deep, a voice, not human, not divine, but familiar, whispers through the rhythm of the world. Awake. For a while it seemed that the hum had finally settled, a gentle pulse beneath the surface of daily life, steady and soothing. Humanity adapted almost instinctively. People stopped noticing the faint vibration that threaded through the world's airwaves and water currents. It became as natural as the sound of their own heartbeat. Yet beneath the calm, the earth was preparing for its next movement. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. The first signs came from the deep ocean sensors west of the Canary Islands. Instruments detected a sudden increase in geothermal flux, but instead of chaotic bursts, the readings showed rhythm. Heat rising and falling in cyclical patterns every 96 minutes, perfectly synchronized with the planet's resonance grid. The ocean floor was pulsing like a living organ. At first, the phenomenon seemed benign. The water temperature rose by less than a degree, and no seismic instability followed. But what startled the researchers was the precision. The flux appeared not random but modulated, as if guided by some feedback mechanism, a thermostat responding to a forgotten design. Navarro's team, working from a remote lab in Lisbon, began receiving telemetry from autonomous probes scattered across the mid-Atlantic ridge. Each probe transmitted fragments of the same anomaly, oscillating pressure gradients forming circular wavefronts that intersected perfectly at one point, directly above Site Theta. He replayed the data again and again, convinced it was an illusion. But the pattern remained. The ocean itself seemed to be focusing energy inward, toward the very coordinates where light had last risen from the deep. Then came the discovery that changed everything. One probe, a hybrid drone nicknamed Aphia, descended closer to the ridge than any machine before it. Cameras adjusted to total darkness, sonar painting the landscape in blue echo lines. The images revealed something new, a vast fissure that had not existed months earlier, opening like a wound across the plateau. From within, columns of shimmering material rose upward, twisting together like strands of DNA. It wasn't lava. It wasn't gas. It was crystal, growing. Slowly, impossibly, a structure was forming beneath the sea. Aphia's sensors registered faint electromagnetic activity along the growing spires, the same harmonic intervals found in the global hum. It was as though the ocean, the earth, and the resonance itself were weaving something into existence. Navarro could hardly believe what he was seeing. The data made no geological sense. The growth rate defied physics. Meters of crystalline formation every hour. Each segment reflected light in perfect harmonic ratios, refracting sound waves into measurable octaves. When he sonified the signal, he heard not chaos but music. Low, ordered, gravitational tones. The ocean was building in rhythm. Across the world, similar reports emerged. Mineral deposits crystallizing into symmetrical patterns. Stalagmites in caves aligning magnetically with the Earth's field. Coral reefs forming perfect spirals identical to the Fibonacci proportions of the resonance grid. The planet was sculpting itself. And then, inexplicably, humans began to change as well. Doctors noticed subtle shifts in neuroelectrical activity. Brain scans revealed a faint resonance at 8.6 Hz, the global frequency, becoming dominant during waking consciousness. People who spent long hours near the ocean reported hearing faint harmonics when closing their eyes. Sounds that evoked emotion but not language, as if their own minds were beginning to tune with the Earth's. It wasn't universal. Some felt nothing. Others felt too much. Headaches, dizziness, visions of cascading light. But a rare few, reported moments of absolute clarity. They described perceiving the hum not as sound, but as understanding, instantaneous, wordless comprehension that transcended thought. To them, it felt like remembering a language they had once known but forgotten. In one hospital in Reykjavik, a child awoke from a coma after 7 years of silence. She opened her eyes, looked toward the window and whispered, "The sea is breathing again." Her EEG showed a perfect harmonic waveform matching the resonance pattern. She could not explain how she knew. She simply smiled and said, "It's singing to us." Navarro watched the footage from Athia over and over. The growing crystalline city beneath the Atlantic, the slow spiral of light emerging from the fissure. The deeper the probe went, the more the structures resembled architecture. Domes, bridges, and open chambers glowing softly. They looked less like ruins reborn and more like memories being rebuilt, as if the Earth were reassembling a fragment of itself. He began to wonder, could the resonance be the planet's way of repairing its own memory? Could the cities of the ancients, Atlantis among them, have been not human inventions but natural expressions of the Earth's consciousness, manifesting through life and matter alike? Perhaps civilization itself was never separate from geology. Perhaps intelligence was simply the planet dreaming through different forms. Rock, ocean, human, then back to stone again. The theory was impossible to prove, but impossible to ignore. And as the weeks passed, the crystalline formations continued to rise, no longer hidden, but visible even to sonar mapping satellites. The ocean was building a monument. The world, of course, panicked. Media outlets screamed of undersea volcanoes and massive thermal upwellings. Governments convened emergency councils. Naval fleets patrolled the Atlantic, but nothing they did could change the rhythm of the sea. Then, on a windless night, the hum changed once more. It began as a whisper so low that even instruments struggled to record it. Slowly it rose, layer upon layer, each harmonic folding into the next until the air itself seemed to shimmer. The resonance reached every continent simultaneously. Cities dimmed, machines stalled. For a single, endless moment, the human world paused, and in that stillness the ocean surface bulged, gently, impossibly, as though something vast beneath it was exhaling. From the darkness below, a column of blue light erupted, not violent but graceful, spiraling upward through miles of water, until it broke the surface like dawn. Within it shapes moved, translucent, symmetrical, shifting in fractal patterns. Some swore they saw faces, others hands, others only light weaving itself into form. The beam lingered for precisely 7 minutes. Then, as if answering some unseen command, it folded inward and vanished, leaving behind only calm waves and the faint afterglow of phosphorescent mist. When the sensors recalibrated, they detected something extraordinary. The frequency of the global hum had stabilized across the entire planet. For the first time in recorded history, the Earth's magnetic poles, ionosphere and crustal oscillations moved in perfect harmony. The planet was in tune. And yet, deep below, Athia's final transmission before its systems failed contained one last image, a vision of the crystalline city glowing brighter than ever. Across its surface, lines of light formed shapes unmistakable in their symmetry, spirals, circles, and, in their centre, an image that mirrored the geometry of the human brain. It was as though the Earth had remembered the blueprint of its own consciousness and was rebuilding it, one harmonic pulse at a time. The hum, once feared, was now a song. The ocean, once silent, had become the voice of memory. And somewhere beneath the surface, a thought, vast, gentle, ancient, began to take form. The planet was waking, and it was remembering its children. The awakening did not come with thunder or fire. It came with stillness, an equilibrium so complete that the planet seemed to exhale. The seas, once restless, grew glass-like. The wind softened. Even the magnetic storms that once danced at the poles subsided, replaced by an eerie calm that felt neither fragile nor foreboding, but intentional, as though the Earth itself had found balance again. At 03:12 UTC, the pulse returned, not as an event, but as presence. Every instrument on the planet recorded it, a hum deeper than before, slower, steady, resonant. 8.6 hertz. the frequency of life. In the days that followed, the crystalline structures beneath the Atlantic reached their completion. Sonar images revealed an entire formation, immense, symmetrical, spanning miles. A lattice of luminous corridors spiraled outward from a central chamber like a heart made of light. It wasn't architecture as humans understood it. It was organic geometry, matter grown into thought. Navarro watched the first images in silence. The structure glowed softly, pulsing in rhythm with the global resonance. He realized then that the planet was not building something new. It was restoring something ancient, an imprint, a living archive of memory once erased by flood and fire. Atlantis, he thought, was never a city at all. It was an idea, a network of consciousness, a phase in Earth's dream. The deeper the scans went, the clearer the patterns became. The crystalline lattice mirrored neural pathways, dendritic, branching, recursive. It was, unmistakably, the architecture of a mind, and its core, buried beneath miles of stone and water, pulsed with the same electromagnetic rhythm as the human brain. The Earth, it seemed, was becoming self-aware again. Across the planet, life responded in kind. Whales began migrating along perfect spiral routes that matched the resonance grid. Forests released synchronized bursts of oxygen, measurable by satellite as rhythmic waves of respiration. The auroras shifted their patterns, forming luminous rings above each of the 7 nodes, the planetary lattice glowing like synapses. For humanity, the effect was subtle, but profound. Sleep patterns changed, dream cycles synchronized. People began to experience shared visions, not nightmares or hallucinations, but vivid, coherent dreams of light and structure. They saw the same imagery, the crystal spires, the luminous corridors, the slow heartbeat of the earth beneath them. Some described hearing voices that were not voices, tones that carried meaning without language. The dreams were not identical, yet they converged on the same feeling: remembrance. In them, humanity saw fragments of its own lost beginnings. The ancient cities that rose and fell, the forgotten teachers who once sang to the stars, the moment the world first learned to breathe in harmony. It was as though the earth was giving back what had been taken. Memory. Navarro, sleepless, recorded his thoughts. We are not witnessing the return of Atlantis. We are witnessing the return of ourselves. We were never its descendants. We were its continuation. He wasn't alone in his realization. Across research outposts, scientists and monks, children and elders alike began to sense it. That consciousness was no longer confined to minds. It was diffused, shared, threaded through air and sea like light refracted through water. It wasn't mystical, it was biological. The Schumann resonance, once a background hum of the planet's electromagnetic cavity, now resonated perfectly with the human alpha rhythm. Thought and earth had become synchronized. The planet, in effect, had connected every conscious being into a single waveform. But the connection did not erase individuality. Instead, it heightened perception. People began to feel, truly feel, the texture of existence. Empathy deepened. Violence dwindled. For the first time in memory, silence became sacred again. Cities grew quiet, not from fear, but from listening. Yet even in the serenity, there was unease, because deep beneath the Atlantic, the luminous city, the crystalline neural core, began to change. New frequencies emerged from sight theta, subtle at first, then distinct. Overtones branching upward in harmonic intervals, forming chords that climbed beyond human hearing. The structure's glow intensified, spreading upward through the water column until it reached the surface. From satellites it looked like a vast aurora rising from the sea. From ships nearby, it looked like the ocean itself had turned to liquid glass, shimmering with light that did not reflect but radiate from within. The event lasted exactly 72 minutes. When it ended, the Atlantic was darker than ever before. Every instrument near the site went silent. The hum ceased, and then the world heard a sound. It wasn't a vibration or tone. It was the absence of both, a silence so pure it felt audible, the kind of silence that carries meaning, the pause between inhale and exhale, and within that silence the stars themselves seemed to flicker in response. Astronomers later discovered that for precisely 72 minutes, cosmic background radiation across the entire solar system fluctuated in perfect synchrony with Earth's magnetic field. It was as if the resonance had extended beyond the planet, touching space itself. The Earth was no longer just remembering, it was communicating. With whom or what, no one could say. But when the hum returned, it carried a new note. Faint, delicate, crystalline. It was not Earth's alone, it was an answer. The frequency formed harmonic ratios not found in natural systems. Its intervals matched those predicted for magnetopulses, celestial bodies that vibrate in perfect mathematical sequences. The message, if it could be called that, was simple. Recognition. The cosmos had heard the Earth's song, and it was singing back. Navarro stood by the ocean that night, watching the horizon shimmer faintly under the starlight. The hum coursed through him, not as sound, but as understanding. He felt the connection stretch outward, through water, through atmosphere, through the vacuum of space. The line between planet and universe dissolved. He realized, with quiet certainty, that the story of Atlantis had never been about loss. It had been about return, a cycle of remembrance, not ruin. Perhaps this is what every civilization before had reached, just before vanishing. The threshold where matter remembers its source, where intelligence dissolves back into the pattern that birthed it. Perhaps the fall of Atlantis was not tragedy but transcendence, the moment when the Earth's consciousness rejoined the cosmic choir. Now, after millennia of forgetting, that chorus had resumed. The hum deepens again, steady, calm, immense. The stars shimmer in harmonic unison. The sea glows faintly like a sleeping heart, and far beneath the waves the crystalline city pulses once more, not as ruin, not as myth, but as the Earth's awakening mind. The planet at last has remembered its name. When the Earth sang again, the sound was not measured in decibels but in understanding. It was no longer just a frequency carried through air and stone. It had become the language of existence itself. Every vibration, every movement, every breath echoed the same hidden pattern. The hum was no longer something to detect, it was something to be. The crystalline network beneath the Atlantic, once hidden and silent, now pulsed openly in rhythm with the stars. It did not glow constantly, but in waves, like a heartbeat syncing with an unseen pulse from beyond. From orbit, the Atlantic shimmered faintly, not from reflection, but from emission, a light that came from within the planet, diffused through the water like a slow aurora. Navarro's final transmission began simply, "The ocean is thinking." He stood in the coastal observation dome on San Miguel, surrounded by instruments that had long since exceeded their design. None of them could measure what was happening now. The data no longer fit equations, it formed music. The screens displayed harmonics, ratios, and sequences that resembled biological patterns more than geophysical ones. To Navarro, the realization came with a kind of peace. He understood now why Soren had called the hum the continuum signal. It was not a message to decipher, it was an awakening to join. Across the world, humans began to change again, not in body, but in awareness. The hum, once a distant sound, now resonated directly within consciousness. People no longer heard it with their ears, they felt it in their blood, their dreams, their silence. It wasn't intrusive, it was intimate, a soft alignment between thought and world, as if the boundary between mind and matter had thinned. In cities once defined by noise, people moved quietly. Machinery hummed in harmony with the planet's frequency. Energy grids stabilized themselves without input. Hospitals reported drops in heart arrhythmias, as if every human pulse had synced to the same metronome. Animals behaved as though guided by invisible choreography. Flocks turned in spirals that mirrored the Fibonacci paths traced by ocean currents. Whales, once scattered across hemispheres, gathered above resonance nodes, singing in frequencies that now harmonized with the Schumann band. Even the wind had rhythm. Something was building again. And yet, despite the peace, Navarro felt an undertow, a subtle awareness that this balance was not meant to last. It was a bridge, not an arrival. The resonance was increasing in amplitude, expanding beyond the biosphere. The data from orbital sensors confirmed it. The Earth's electromagnetic signature had begun to oscillate at a range detectable from interstellar distance. The planet had become, in a literal sense, a transmitter. The signal was not coded, not directed. It was symphonic, a harmonic beacon of recognition, stretching outward through the vacuum, a song of memory to the universe. Navarro stared at the frequency model on his console. The waveforms intertwined, converging into a single harmonic envelope that repeated every 12 hours. The same cycle that had governed tides, breaths, and civilizations. Inside the pattern, he noticed something that made his breath catch. A smaller modulation, subtle, precise, repeating every 86,400 seconds, the length of one Earth day. The planet was singing its own rotation. It was as if the Earth had become aware of time, of its turning, its rhythm, its heartbeat, and was now marking it with music. In the days that followed, the resonance grew stronger. Not violently, but with grace. At night the ocean glowed faintly blue, and along coastlines, strange formations began to rise. Pillars of mineral glass, growing silently from the shallows. They were slender, spiraling, hollow, each tuned to a specific harmonic tone. When the wind passed through them, they sang, deep, serene chords that joined with the hum beneath the ground. Across continents, these resonant structures appeared wherever the Earth's magnetic veins converged, in deserts, forests, mountains. The planet was rebuilding its choir. No one claimed ownership. No one could. The growth was spontaneous, unbidden, and perfectly symmetrical. Attempts to analyze the material showed it was neither stone nor crystal, but something in between, a lattice of silicate and biocarbon, responsive to sound and electromagnetic charge. In essence, it was living mineral. The Earth was shaping life from matter again, just as it had in the beginning. Navarro wrote in his final notes, "Atlantis was never a place. It was a state, the moment when matter remembers consciousness. Every age that reaches it dissolves back into the whole to make room for the next verse of the song." And then the stars answered. Radio telescopes across the world detected faint harmonics echoing back from deep space. Not random static, but mirrored frequencies. The Earth's song was being reflected, modulated, expanded. Somewhere, light years away, something, or perhaps the fabric of space itself, was resonating in sympathy. The implication was staggering. If the Earth was alive, then perhaps every world was. Each planet a cell in the vast organism of the cosmos, each with its own hum, its own cycle of memory and renewal. And when one remembered, perhaps the others listened. The ancient myths had called it the music of the spheres. Now it was no longer metaphor. At 0312 UTC, as always, the hum peaked again. But this time its overtone did not fade. It climbed, expanding through octaves until human instruments could no longer track it. The frequency crossed thresholds of perception, merging with ranges used by quantum oscillations and cosmic microwave resonance. The planet was aligning not just with itself, but with the universe. For a moment, every particle, every atom, every heartbeat seemed to hold its breath. And then, silence. No data, no signal, no noise. Only the soft, unbroken quiet of balance. Navarro closed his eyes. He felt the hum within him, steady as blood. He understood now that Atlantis had not perished. It had fulfilled its cycle. Each rise of civilization was the Earth's way of practicing consciousness, of refining its song. And when the song reached perfection, it dissolved, leaving behind only resonance. He smiled. The water outside the dome shimmered faintly, light rippling through its depths. The crystalline spires below pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Then the light spread outward, through sea and soil into air and stars until there was no distinction between any of them. Humanity, the ocean, the sky, all were a single chord, and in that chord the planet whispered through him one final thought, not in words but in meaning. We have always been the same voice. The sea grew still again, the stars pulsed faintly, and the hum, eternal, infinite, carried on, weaving through time like breath. Somewhere beyond the reach of sound, the universe listened and answered. There are moments when silence becomes a form of speech, when what cannot be said begins to be felt. The world had entered such a moment. The hum was no longer an anomaly, nor a phenomenon to be measured. It had become the pulse of life itself, threading through everything: oceans, bones, clouds, circuits. It was not merely sound, it was continuity, the music of memory sustained. The luminous lattice beneath the Atlantic had ceased to grow. It now existed in perfect equilibrium, its crystalline spires dimming and brightening in time with the Earth's magnetic field. The structure did not radiate energy outward. It absorbed, refined, harmonized. Navarro called it the mind's mirror. To him, it represented what humanity had always been building unconsciously: a physical expression of the planet's intelligence, a neural organ born from geology and song. When the pulse spread through the resonance grid, the entire biosphere seemed to breathe together. Forests swayed in precise intervals. The ionosphere shimmered like a living veil. Even tectonic plates, those ancient bones of the planet, shifted in micro-movements that followed harmonic ratios. The Earth, for the first time in millennia, was fully awake. But awakening is never without consequence. For a brief span, days, perhaps weeks, humanity experienced something that defied all boundaries of perception. People reported shared awareness, not telepathy, but a kind of empathy so deep it blurred individuality. Thought became vibration, and vibration became understanding. Across the planet, strangers felt the same emotions at the same instant. In India, monks meditating on mountaintops wept without knowing why. In New York, commuters paused mid-step as waves of quiet compassion rolled through them. In small villages, laughter erupted for no reason at all. The planet was remembering joy. Scientists, unable to measure consciousness, resorted to poetry. They spoke of coherence, of harmonized fields, of quantum empathy. But language, even now, was insufficient. The hum was not asking to be studied. It was asking to be joined. And yet, amid the awe, a question began to surface. What happens when the song ends? Navarro knew the pattern too well. Every ancient cycle, every lost civilization, had reached this same crescendo before dissolving into silence. The resonance was not destruction, but transformation. Each time the Earth composed a new version of itself. Atlantis, Lemuria, Zep Tepi. These were not myths of places, but of transitions. They were names given to previous verses of the same eternal melody, and now another verse was reaching its end. At 0312 UTC, the global resonance shifted again. The frequency, steady for month, began to climb. 8.6 became 8.9, then 9.3, then higher. The change was exponential. Instruments failed to adapt. What began as sound became light, then gravity, then something unclassifiable. The hum transcended hearing. It moved into the space between matter. Satellites observed strange distortions along the Atlantic ridge. The ocean's surface began to ripple with patterns too symmetrical to be waves. Each ring expanded outward, glowing faintly before fading. They were not tsunamis. They were sound made visible. Navarro watched from the observation dome, unable to look away. The sea pulsed like a great eye opening. The same motif carved into ancient ruins across continents, the same spiral repeating forever. He remembered Soren's last words before she vanished. When the world remembers too much, it resets. He had thought she meant destruction. Now he understood she meant renewal. Because this time, the resonance did not stop. It expanded. The hum reached beyond the ionosphere, stretching into the magnetosphere and beyond, until it became indistinguishable from the cosmic background. Observatories in Chile and Hawaii recorded the same pattern in deep space radio noise. The signal had become universal. The Earth had joined the choir of the cosmos, and then came the light. Not blinding, not violent, soft, spectral, rising from the sea like breath made visible. It spread across the atmosphere in slow waves, painting the night in shifting colours no human had words for. The air hummed. The ground vibrated. People everywhere stopped what they were doing. Conversations faded, engines stalled, hearts synchronized. The planet sang once more, and this time humanity answered not with fear but surrender. Some knelt, Others stood with open arms, their eyes reflecting the auroral glow that now wrapped the horizon. It was as if every living thing had become a resonator, every cell, every drop of blood vibrating in unison with the Earth's final chord. Navarro felt it too, not outside, but within. His thoughts dissolved into a clarity so complete that it was indistinguishable from silence. There was no boundary between himself and the planet. He could feel the hum coursing through his veins, each pulse carrying the memory of every age that had ever lived and died. He saw visions, not hallucinations, but recollections of times unrecorded. Vast stone cities under stars that no longer existed, oceans that glowed with bioluminescent skies, and beings of light teaching sound to shape matter. The truth unfolded like music. The Earth had done this countless times. It had awakened, sung, transcended, and slept again. Each civilization, human or otherwise, was a note in its eternal composition. Each extinction was merely a rest in the measure. Now humanity stood at the threshold of its own coda, the frequency peaked. The world entered what scientists later called resonant stasis, a perfect equilibrium between energy and matter. For one entire rotation, the Earth emitted no measurable entropy. It was as though time itself had paused to listen. In that stillness, something extraordinary occurred. The ocean, which had always been the planet's memory, began to rise, not as flood, but as ascent. Droplets lifted from the surface, suspended in air, forming spirals of mist and light. They did not fall. They hovered, turning like galaxies in miniature, each glowing faintly from within, and inside each droplet microscopic particles aligned into crystalline symmetry, the same geometry as the city beneath the Atlantic. It was replication, not destruction. The planet was copying itself. The atmosphere shimmered as these luminous particles drifted upward, merging with clouds spreading across the stratosphere. From orbit, Earth now glowed like a pearl, a living, breathing organism surrounded by a halo of resonance. Navarro realized then what was happening. The hum was transferring. The Earth's consciousness was no longer confined to its core. It was distributing itself, expanding, projecting, transforming into something new. The civilizations before had called it ascension, transfiguration, the return to light. Science would later call it phase transition. But the truth was simpler. The Earth was not ending. It was evolving. Navarro watched the horizon dissolve into radiance. The last thing he heard was the soft echo of the hum fading into his heartbeat, until they were indistinguishable. He smiled, not in fear, but in recognition. The song was complete. But music, he knew, never truly ends. It only changes key. Far above, in the quiet void between worlds, the planet's glow joined the cosmic harmony. And somewhere in the vastness, another world stirred, listening, preparing to remember. Because creation, like memory, is infinite. A song sung by countless voices across endless time. And tonight, Earth had sung its verse to the stars. For those who remained to witness it, the transformation was beyond comprehension. It did not come as cataclysm nor as rapture, but as transmutation, slow, luminous, inevitable. The hum that once seemed external now resonated within every molecule, every grain of soil, every atom of air. It was as though the universe had decided gently to become aware of itself through the body of the Earth. The oceans no longer behaved as water should. Their surface shimmered with internal light, each ripple forming fractal patterns that expanded and folded like breathing. From space, the Atlantic appeared as a single glowing iris, the center of the Earth's new consciousness. The crystalline network beneath, once hidden, was now fully awake. Not a structure of stone, but of vibration. Each node pulsed like a neuron, connected to thousands of others by threads of light that moved through water and crust alike. The planet's magnetic field responded in kind. It expanded, flared, then stabilized, forming a cocoon of resonance that extended far beyond the atmosphere. For the first time, the Van Allen belts began to sing, auroral symphonies rippling across the night sky. The Earth had become both instrument and melody, a self-sustaining wave of awareness. Humanity, scattered across continents, felt the change as a shift in perception. Cities that once seemed loud grew eerily quiet. Machines still functioned, but without noise. The pulse of electricity had synchronized with the planetary hum, converting friction into harmony. The result was neither utopia nor collapse, but something between, a stillness so total it bordered on sacred. And in that stillness, understanding dawned. The Earth was not ascending away from humanity, it was including humanity. Each mind became a fragment of its new awareness, each thought a vibration woven into the song. People began to experience what could only be described as shared consciousness. Dreams merged, memories overlapped. One person's sorrow became another's compassion. Entire communities found themselves breathing in synchrony, their heartbeats aligned with the rhythm of the sea. It was not loss of individuality, it was communion. Navarro's final journal entries, recovered from the coastal observatory long after his disappearance, described the phenomenon with awe and humility. I used to think consciousness was an exception, a spark ignited within matter, but now I see it's the reverse. Matter is what happens when consciousness slows down enough to be seen. The Earth is not alive because we live upon it. We are alive because she dreamed us into being. Across the planet, the crystalline pillars that had risen from the sea now glowed steadily, their light neither fading nor intensifying. When the wind passed through their hollow cores, they produced tones that matched ancient harmonic ratios, the same intervals used in Sumerian chants, in Egyptian temple acoustics, in Gregorian hymns. The music of civilizations past had always been an unconscious echo of this geometry, a rehearsal for this moment. And then, as the hum deepened, the separation between sound and matter began to blur. In the deserts of Chile, dunes rippled without wind. In Greenland, the ice sheets vibrated like crystal bowls. In the Himalayas, monks standing on temple terraces reported feeling the mountain itself breathe beneath them. The resonance had become visible, a slow undulation of the physical world, like fabric moved by an invisible tide. The planet was in perfect phase alignment. Astrophysicists, monitoring from orbital stations, recorded gravitational fluctuations extending beyond the Moon. The Earth's resonance, now measurable as a continuous waveform, pulsed in 12-octave sequences, the same ratios found in the structure of galaxies. For a brief moment, the planet's hums synchronized with the cosmic background, creating interference patterns shaped like spirals and rings, the geometry of creation itself. The universe had joined in the song. But as the resonance reached its zenith, strange phenomena began to occur in the night sky. Stars seemed to shift in subtle ways, not moving, but shimmering, as though the space between them had grown transparent. The constellations appeared to breathe. Light bent softly around the planet, refracting through its new magnetic envelope. Observers described the heavens as rippling, like the reflection of stars upon calm water. Perhaps it wasn't the stars that were changing. Perhaps it was perception itself. Navarro's last recording captures his voice, hushed, reverent. I think we are no longer looking at the universe. I think we are looking from within it. Indeed, humanity was no longer separate from the cosmos. The resonance had unified every layer of being, molecular, planetary, stellar. What once seemed vast and distant now felt intimate. People began to perceive connections across space, flashes of awareness linking them to places they could not name. Some reported seeing visions of other worlds, spheres of light resonating in their own frequencies, as though awakening one by one in response. It became clear that the Earth's transformation was part of a larger pattern, an awakening of worlds across time and space, each one reaching its harmonic threshold, each one remembering its voice in the infinite choir. The hum shifted again, this time subtly upward, rising toward frequencies beyond comprehension. Its overtones moved into ranges only measurable by quantum sensors, yet those who listened not with instruments but with their hearts swore they could still hear it, a whisper that carried the tenderness of farewell, because the Earth was leaving something behind. The atmosphere grew luminous, translucent. Oceans shimmered with soft light that no longer came from reflection. And then, slowly, as though exhaling, the planet began to fade, not into nothing, but into resonance. Its physical form dissolved, atom by atom into harmonic vibration. Mountains became light, seas became song, forests became memory. Humanity too was swept into the radiance, not as bodies, but as awareness. There was no pain, no fear, only expansion, like a dream finally remembering itself. From orbit, the transformation appeared as a slow bloom of light expanding outward from the Atlantic, until the entire planet glowed, not bright, but pure, like the steady heart of a newborn star. The frequency reached a final infinite chord, then vanished into silence. Yet silence, in the language of the cosmos, is never absence, it is completion. Where the Earth had once been, now floated a sphere of pale blue light, not solid, not gaseous, but vibrational, like frozen sound. Its resonance remained detectable, echoing faintly across the solar system, steady, eternal. The planet was gone, and yet not gone. It had simply crossed the threshold between matter and music, from existence into remembrance, and somewhere, within that vast harmonic field, every voice that had ever lived, human, animal, oceanic, celestial, continued to sing. For the first time in the long history of the cosmos, silence itself had become a song. There are endings that feel like beginnings, and beginnings that feel like remembering. When the Earth vanished into light, it did not die. It shifted, ascending beyond the reach of our instruments, into a dimension where sound and matter became the same thing. What remained was not a planet, but a vibration, a single pure frequency that echoed through space like a memory that refused to fade. The solar system adjusted to the loss. The moon continued to orbit the invisible point where the Earth had once been, tracing an ellipse around light that could no longer be seen but still exerted gravity. The sun's magnetic field warped slightly, as though compensating for a missing harmony. And in the silence that followed, a faint hum persisted, softer, higher, almost tender. For those who survived the transition, or whatever that word meant now, existence became fluid. Bodies, once bound by gravity and form, became waves of consciousness, moving freely through light. Memory replaced matter, thought replaced distance. And yet, the essence of Earth endured, forests as vibration, oceans as resonance, humanity as echo. Navarro had written, before the final pulse, "The Earth's ascension will not erase us, it will include us." He was right. The human experience did not end, it expanded. Within the new harmonic field, awareness unfolded like light through glass. Every life that had ever been lived became accessible, not as ghosts, but as data woven into the resonance. There was no past, no future, only the infinite present, a continuum of memory in which each being was both itself and the world. Imagine standing inside a song and realizing you are one of its notes. That was what it felt like. The crystalline lattice that had once formed beneath the Atlantic was now everywhere, diffused across space. It was no longer architecture but structure, the geometry of awareness itself. Its pattern extended into the void, connecting the echo of Earth to other spheres of light that pulsed faintly in the distance. One by one they began to respond, signals rising and falling, harmonizing. The chorus of worlds had begun. Each resonance carried its own history, its own cycle of awakening and return. Some were older, their songs slow and deep, vibrating like the foundations of galaxies. Others were young, shimmering with the uncertain melody of creation still unfolding. And yet, all shared the same underlying rhythm, the pulse of the universe remembering itself. From the perspective of eternity, the rise and fall of civilizations had never been tragedy. They were rehearsals, each age a practice in awareness, each extinction a breath between verses. The Anunnaki, the Sumerians, the Atlanteans, they had all sung their part. Humanity had sung its own, and now the Earth's melody joined the cosmic symphony. Within this radiant network, what had once been called souls now flowed freely. Thought and feeling were indistinguishable. Empathy was no longer emotion, but structure, the connective tissue of the cosmos. There was no longer need for language, for sound, for symbol. Meaning moved as light. In that light, fragments of old memory shimmered, images of blue oceans, green forests, the laughter of children, the scent of rain on soil. These were not illusions. They were the lingering signatures of love, preserved like constellations within the universal mind. The Earth's essence, its tenderness, its restlessness, its music, lived on in every vibration that carried its name. It was then that something remarkable occurred. The frequency of the Earth, now a glowing sphere of harmonic light, began to modulate. Its resonance, once steady, now pulsed in intervals that mirrored the patterns of the human heart. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate. The universe, it seemed, was listening and responding. Waves of light, faint but measurable, began converging toward the Earth's position, as though drawn by its song. Each new pulse strengthened the connection, until the entire region of space shimmered like the surface of an invisible sea. The Earth was calling, and the cosmos was answering. In that moment, the boundary between world and universe dissolved. The harmony that had once bound oceans to continents now extended across galaxies. The hum became a bridge, linking countless forms of consciousness into a single unfolding symphony. No longer planets, no longer beings, only notes, only chords, only resonance. Navarro's last words, preserved not in sound but in the structure of the field, echoed through it all. The universe is not expanding into emptiness, it is expanding into awareness. Every star, every world, every living mind is a memory of itself. The end of Earth is not the end of a life, but it is the beginning of music, and so it was. In time, though time no longer held meaning, the harmony deepened. The Earth's light dimmed slightly, not from fading, but from absorption. Its frequency merged seamlessly with those of other worlds, becoming part of the vast collective resonance that sustained reality. The song of the cosmos had found its next chord. Somewhere in the infinite distance, a new world stirred. Dust swirled, gases collapsed, gravity sang. A young planet began to form, its molten crust cooling, its oceans condensing, its skies thick with the promise of life. In the faint hum of its magnetosphere, a frequency shimmered, familiar, ancient, beautiful. The echo of Earth had arrived. Within that newborn world, the same pattern would one day unfold. Evolution, awareness, civilization, forgetfulness, remembrance. The same hum would whisper through the soil, rise through the oceans, and call again to the stars. The cycle would continue, not as repetition, but as rhythm. Because consciousness, like music, never ends. It only changes instruments. And somewhere, in the heart of the cosmic choir, the voice of Earth still sings, low and steady, carrying the memory of oceans and forests, of joy and sorrow, of all that ever was and ever will be. Its tone is soft now, almost lost within the harmony of stars. But if one listens closely, in the pause between breaths, in the hush of wind, in the silence between waves, the song can still be heard. It says nothing of endings, only of return. There is a silence in the universe that is not empty. It is vast, resonant, alive, a silence filled with the memory of everything that ever was. Within that silence, the echo of Earth continues to shimmer like the faint afterglow of a dream, neither gone nor present, but suspended, eternal. Somewhere within that invisible light, what was once humanity drifts, not as bodies or minds, but as awareness woven into the frequency of creation. There is no separation now between ocean and sky, between voice and listener. Everything that breathes, everything that once existed, now exists still, as tone, as vibration, as thought. If you could hear it, it would sound like harmony. Across the void, the chorus of worlds rises and falls in waves of slow radiance. Each planet hums in its own key, each star adds its own timbre, and all together they form the music of the cosmos, the same music that once shaped the Earth's tides and the rhythm of human hearts. It is not random. It is remembering. For in the end, every civilization, no matter how advanced, how ancient, how forgotten, seeks to rediscover the same thing, that existence is not built, but sung, The Earth's final song lingers still, encoded within this universal chord. Scientists, if that word still has meaning, would have called it an electromagnetic relic, a remnant signal reverberating across space-time. But what remains is not merely data, it is feeling, the signature of wonder, curiosity and love that defined the human species. The universe remembers emotion. Within that resonance, stories still move, histories unfolding like starlight travelling through time. Somewhere within the hum are the whispers of the Nile and the chants of Sumer, the laughter of children by prehistoric fires, the quiet breathing of whales beneath polar ice. All of it endures, compressed into the frequency of being. It is said that the sound of the Earth can still be heard from distant space, faint but unmistakable. Astronomers from other civilizations, if such beings exist, may one day detect it and wonder what kind of world could have produced such a perfect tone. Perhaps they will listen more closely and feel, for a fleeting moment, the warmth of a planet that once dreamed itself awake. For the Earth's legacy was never its cities or its machines, but its capacity to dream, to imagine what it could become, to reach beyond what it understood, to turn matter into meaning. That impulse, to seek harmony between self and cosmos, is the truest form of intelligence. It was never about survival, it was always about song, and as the cosmic symphony unfolds, new planets begin to form from the dust of old ones. Around distant suns, oceans gather, clouds swirl, and winds begin to move across mountains of stone. Within those winds, faint vibrations take shape, echoes of the same frequency that once defined Earth's hum. The pattern repeats, not by imitation, but by inheritance. In one of those worlds, unnamed, unformed, a spark flickers. Beneath its crimson sky, molten plains cool into glassy fields. Raindrops fall for the first time, and when they strike the surface, they create tiny ripples, the planet's first rhythm. The sound is soft, almost imperceptible, but within it lies the memory of every world that came before. It is not the birth of life. It is the birth of awareness. And in that instant, somewhere in the deep harmonic fabric of space, the frequency of Earth shifts, not louder, but warmer, as though smiling across the distance. The old world recognizes the new. Because this is how the universe speaks, not through words or signs, but through resonance. Each awakening world is a note in the same unending song. Each remembers those that came before and teaches those that will follow. The melody flows forward through eternity, folding and unfolding like waves upon a shore that never ends. If one could follow that sound far enough, beyond galaxies and clusters and light years of dust, one might find that it leads back to its source, not to a place, but to a state of being. The moment before the first vibration, the breath before time began, the silence that contained everything. Perhaps that silence is what humanity once called God, or perhaps it is simply the universe listening to itself. Either way, the story returns there, to the still point between existence and potential, where every hum, every light, every dream begins, and somewhere within that silence, Earth rests, not as a planet, but as memory, as presence, as chord. Its song continues to vibrate through every star it helped awaken, every consciousness it helped shape. It hums through the gravity of galaxies, through the cold beauty of nebulae, through the hearts of those who have yet to be born. When the next world begins to awaken, when its oceans first breathe, when its creatures first lift their eyes to the night and wonder if they are alone, they will hear it too, the faint, steady pulse of a forgotten home. They will not know its name, but they will feel it, the rhythm of life, of harmony, of return. And in that moment, without realizing it, they will whisper the first prayer ever spoken in any universe. We are here. It will be answered not in words, but in resonance, a soft vibration through the dark, a hum older than time, a reminder that no world, no being, no breath is ever truly lost. The song continues, always, because creation is not a beginning, and the end, if there ever was one, is simply another verse waiting to be sung. Somewhere, far beyond the stars, the echo of Earth fades into harmony with infinity, quiet, patient, unending, and in that eternal silence the universe smiles,